Chapter 380. With a slash of his sword, Fang Xingjian performed Terra Ingurgitation's ultimate technique. At the same time, countless silver scales appeared all over his body. It was as if there were flames burning on his body. Countless supporting force fields enveloped his body, aiding his sword. Under the effects of Terra Ingurgitation, the gravity within a range of 5 kilometers disappeared. How terrifying would the gravity within a range of 5 kilometers be when they were at a depth of several kilometers underground? It was as if Fang Xingjian had channeled all the power of the earth above his head into this sword attack. A power of several million or several hundred million tons was attracted over, causing the prowess of this sword attack to be many times stronger than the one performed by the Gao clan. The long sword swayed slightly, and before it could get close, a shock wave had already swept out. The bodies of the remaining 2 gray knights and 3 conferred knights floated slightly. Then at the next moment, they were knocked into the walls by the gushing shock wave, and their tendons and bones were broken in that instant. All the corpses, sand, wreckage, and various other things floated up from the many levels of the base. Even the ground within a range of 5 kilometers started to shatter, and the earth's crust started to crack. It was as if there was a huge, invisible hand that wanted to grab hold of the ground and lift it into the sky. In less than a second, the ground where the entire base was located shattered, and violent powers soared into the sky, pushing countless amounts of soil into the sky. It was as if there was an invisible shock wave flying toward the sky. A huge hole was blasted out in the ground, which was several kilometers deep, revealing the location of the Hall of Flesh and Blood. From afar, it was as if several hundred volcanoes had erupted at the same time. The ground split open, and explosions shook the ground. Sand that weighed millions and millions of tons soared into the sky and entered the atmosphere. Then they scattered down, covering up large areas of the sky like a sandstorm. The entire sky and atmosphere were covered in fog, and it was as if the surroundings could not be seen clearly. It was as if volcanic ash had engulfed the area within a range of several kilometers. However, at the next moment, a loud sound rang out from the depths of the smoke. Amidst the terrifying sound, streams of forces exploded from the center. They were like gusts of strong gales, blowing away all the smoke and dust and revealing the ruins of the base. That was Fang Xingjian's second slash. In the center of the ruins, the bishop, who was slowly reassembling his body, stood there quietly. 2 huge tentacles extended out from his chest, blocking Fang Xingjian's sword slash that came down once again. However, in the next moment, Fang Xingjian's body flashed. It was as if hundreds of shadows had appeared in an instant, surrounding the bishop and attacking him in frenzy. Waves of air swept out, sweeping the surrounding ruins and debris everywhere. Although Fang Xingjian attacked fiercely, they were all blocked by the growing tentacles on the bishop's body. "Kid, your strength really amazes me." The bishop's eyes kept moving, like a high-speed camera trying to lock on a Fang Xingjian's figure. His gaze was filled with greed and terror. The power that Fang Xingjian had displayed earlier had made him feel astonished. If it was not because he could reassemble his physical body endlessly, as well as replenishing the depletion of his physical body by performing black magic to summon life forms from another world, he would have died from that earlier attack. After all, that absolute violence had crushed all his cells to death. He had no choice but to perform black magic to summon life forms from another world to fend off the attacks for him. He then kept on engulfing the body of life forms from another world. Only then did he manage to fend off the attacks. However, he had already depleted almost all of his energy, and his powers were greatly reduced. Right now, his body was only over 80 centimeters tall, and he felt as if he had shrunk by more than half. This was because most of his physical body had died from that earlier attack. The reason why he was able to retain so much of his physical body was because he had performed black magic to summon life forms from another world. However, Fang Xingjian did not pay any heed to the bishop's greed and words. The power throughout his body flowed intensely, and the mental cultivation method in his mind seemed to be circulated to an extreme. Countless silver light extended out in his consciousness, and the skill seed that represented the universal sword dominance lunisolar mental cultivation method seemed to have turned into a silver sun at this moment. Then, Fang Xingjian's sword stance changed, and demolition sword light flashed. He had already started performing the prodigious demolition sword. Clearly, he wanted to take advantage of the bishop's serious injuries to kill him in one go. As he performed the prodigious demolition sword, wherever the sword light passed by, the tentacles would be annihilated into nothingness, turning into the most basic heat energy and dissipating into the world. Sword after sword pierced out consecutively, and a myriad of sword light encompassed the bishop's body, rapidly reducing the mass of his body. He had no choice but to perform black magic once again. In void space, many metal tentacles extended out, blocking Fang Xingjian. However, they were easily slashed apart by his demolition sword light. With a loud bang, the two gray knights pushed away the debris on their bodies, and the three conferred knights crawled out as well. Looking at the vast and shattered land before them, looking at the sunlight shining down from above, they could not believe what they were seeing. As the two parties exchanged blows time and time again, strong gales gushed forth, causing their faces to tremble incessantly. The lady in plate's eyes were filled with disbelief. To think that the prowess of this sword attack is so powerful. Everyone looked at the ruins in astonishment. Not long later, a human figure in white light darted out. It was Smiling Face, who had performed the separation of soul and body. He looked in astonishment at the center of the ruins in the distance, at the spot where streams of air currents had swept out, and said, "They're still fighting. That kid has the upper hand. To think that he's so powerful? Is he really a level 24 conferred knight?" The two gray knights, the man with snake heads and the man with pig heads, looked over. When they saw that the bishop was being suppressed by Fang Xingjian's prodigious demolition sword attacks, and that his mass was being depleted, they dashed over together. The bishop sensed that his flesh and blood were being depleted at a rapid rate. He let out a furious bellow, and streams of gray light flashed on his body. "Excellent, young conferred knight. It's been a long time since someone has been able to force me to this extent." Level 6 black magic, Touch of Flesh and Blood, was activated. This black magic could make use of the evil god's powers to engulf the other party's physical body, using it to replenish one's injuries. The bishop had risked his life to protect himself from Terra Ingurgitation's sword attack. He was already seriously injured, and his powers were greatly reduced. Therefore, he performed this magic to recover his powers. Moreover, as a level 6 black magic, the prowess of this move was not to be underestimated. Right now, even the strongest Mage King in the Mage Association was only able to perform level 9 black magic. As the streams of gray light grew increasingly stronger, streams of gray energy tentacles extended out from the bishop's body. Gray light swept out at an extremely fast speed. Simultaneously, they also brought along a powerful suction force, wrapping around the bodies of the two gray knights who were charging over from afar. The two gray knights were extremely powerful. Their physical attributes surpassed that of ordinary level 25 conferred knights. In addition to their undying abilities, they were comparable to level 26 conferred knights. However, after being wrapped up by the energy tentacles, the two of them were unable to resist at all. With a cry, they were dragged onto the bishop's body and integrated into it at a speed that could be seen by the naked eye. Amazing! We can't take this attack head on. The man in plates and the old man let out an astonished cry, and the will clone that Smiling Face had already dashed out toward Fang Xingjian. However, he was still one step too late. At the instant he dashed out, several tins of energy tentacles had already swept toward Fang Xingjian. Chapter 381. Fang Xingjian let out a soft whistle, advancing instead of retreating. It was because he knew that if he were to allow the other party to absorb the flesh and blood of the two gray knights, to recover, and then perform a series of powerful black magic, then he would probably have to activate the Heaven's Volition Sword Intent in order to win. The Heaven's Volition Sword Intent would deplete at least 100,000 potential points, which was equivalent to wasting 3 days of hard work in tempering his attributes. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he would not be willing to do so. Therefore, faced with the energy tentacles that were charging toward him at lightning speed, Fang Xingjian continued to attack, fighting attacks with attacks. The Zenith Light sword formation was activated and swept out. Several hundred streams of ether sword ripples also swept out, slicing all the metal tentacles into pieces. They then slashed out toward the bishop's body together with the demolition sword light. The Zenith Light sword formation, which had a high temperature of 10,000 degrees Celsius, 16 times that of supersonic speed, 3 times the strength of the ether sword ripples, and the annihilating demolition sword light all slashed toward the bishop's body simultaneously. The bishop's eyes were filled with astonishment, and doubt. At the next moment, a large part of his body had been vaporized, and his head had been annihilated by Fang Xingjian's prodigious demolition sword into the most basic heat energy, dissipating into the air. Elsewhere, the 3 conferred knights who had lost the bishop's control seemed to have returned to normal as well. They cheered and ran toward Fang Xingjian. Fang Xingjian touched the area below his ribs, feeling anxious and doubtful. Those energy tentacles seemed to have brushed past me, but why am I fine? Simultaneously, he felt a piercing silver light emitting in his mind. It represented that the Universal Sword Dominance Lunisolar Mental Cultivation Method skill seed had once again gone through a transformation. After flattening the Terrene Shrine's base with a single sword attack, his fury was completely swept away. While he was feeling great, his mental cultivation method had also been raised to level 7. The lady in plates and the other 2 conferred knights came to Fang Xingjian's side and said in disbelief, "Are you really at level 24? You should be at level 28 or 29, right?" Old man was also astonished and doubtful. How on earth did you do that earlier sword attack? To think that it overturned the entire mountain. I've never seen such a terrifying sword attack before. Fang Xingjian did not say a word. He merely shook his head and looked toward the sky with a doubtful gaze. High up in the sky, the green-haired and green-eyed demoness stared at Fang Xingjian, her eyes filled with greed. "I've found you, the promised person." As she spoke, she had already left with a giggle, leisurely flying to another exit more than 10 kilometers away from the base. She floated in, and when she was halfway there, she saw a piece of gray flesh wriggling forward. As it moved forward, the flesh kept changing shape, gradually turning into limbs, eyes, ears, nose, and hair. Finally, it turned from crawling to running, turning into a black-haired, black-eyed boy. Looking at the boy in front of her, the witch smiled and said, "You really didn't die. But was this all that was left of the other world's flesh and blood? Isn't it enough for you to transform into a human?" The black-haired, black-eyed child coldly stared at the witch and said, "What? Do you want to capture me? My research results have all been hidden by me. It's useless to catch me." "How could that be? I'm not interested in violence at all." The demoness shrugged and said, "But I think it's better for you to look for the 3rd prince in your current situation." "The Empire's 3rd prince?" The boy let out a cold laugh and said, "The Empire has just sent a conferred knight to annihilate me. You wanted to look for him? Green robes." The Chaos, which was the leader of all the green-robed mages amongst the mages. "Ha! Who do you think has been sponsoring your research and protecting your base while the Terrene Shrine has been in hiding all these years?" When the boy heard this, he could not help but be taken aback. "You're saying, shoo." The Chaos, which chuckled and made a gesture to keep it a secret. "Even ants want to steal the powers of God." A hint of disdain flashed in the boy's eyes. "They're just making a wedding dress for us." With that, he suddenly stared at the Chaos Witch and asked, "Why is that level 24 conferred knight immune to the powers of God? The person you're talking about should be him, right?" The green-haired, green-eyed demoness laughed. Her body was completely devoid of flames, and she turned into fragments that dissipated into the air. "He's the key, the agreement, the final realm, the chaos that will bring an end to the world. The boy looked coldly at the disappearing figure and curled his lips, saying, "A bunch of people who like to play tricks." One day later, the entire ruins had been sealed off by the Empire. Countless knights and staff members were searching for the remaining clues in the ruins. However, the destructive prowess of Feng Xingjian's terra ingurgitation was too great, and most of the information had been lost. In the office of the great western city's government, Feng Xingjian sat on a chair. His eyes seemed to be wandering away. In front of him was a table full of officials. In that case, you couldn't hold back in the end and killed that Serene Shrine's bishop? Feng Xingjian nodded. "Thank you for your cooperation in the investigation." Feng Xingjian walked out from the government building, holding a box in his right hand. It was the reason why he had participated in the attack on the Serene Shrine. It was the sunstone that could raise the level of his effulgence weapon. The staff members had found it in the Serene Shrine's ruins and handed it over to Feng Xingjian. However, Feng Xingjian was still thinking about the Serene Shrine. The implications of this incident were far too great. To think that there was such a terrifying evil cult's lair hidden in the Great Western region and near the Great Western City. The other party had hidden it for many years and had killed over 10,000 innocent civilians. Moreover, the other party had even developed evil magic that could synthesize humans and ferocious beasts and channel in a large amount of human consciousness, forming an almost undying physical body and inextinguishable spirit. From now on, the Empire's upper echelon would definitely intensify their attack on the Serene Shrine. However, what Feng Xingjian was more concerned about was the intrinsic quality of the Serene Shrine's mages. Black magic, mages, Serene Shrine, diabolic energy. Feng Xingjian once again recalled the last scene where he had exchanged blows with the bishop. Why? Why didn't he activate black magic even though he had clearly come into contact with me at the end? Feng Xingjian's eyes narrowed slightly. Although he could not understand this, when he recalled the tragic scene in the Serene Shrine, killing intent surged in his heart once again. This was especially so when the skills seed in his mind, which represented the universal sword dominance lunisolar mental cultivation method, kept on flashing with a silver glow. Just then, Robert had already walked up to Feng Xingjian, half a step behind him. "Sir, is there anything?" It's nothing." Feng Xingjian said casually, "Gather information related to the Serene Shrine at the same time. If you're able to find their new base, inform me immediately." No matter what, the black magic research conducted by the Serene Shrine had already roused the killing intent in Feng Xingjian's heart. He felt that as long as he killed the people from the Serene Shrine, his universal sword dominance lunisolar mental cultivation method would be able to improve even more. This was in line with his heart. "Understood. And what did you say to the public this time around?" Robert bowed and continued, "Sir, the Academy has heard of the destruction you've caused in Pearl City and the Serene Shrine's base. Therefore, they've sealed off all related news at the first instant, announcing to the public that it was an earthquake and a landslide. They also hope that you can return to the Academy immediately. They wish to purchase the complete legacy on the Pantheon Monument immediately." Feng Xingjian said calmly, "Let's hang them out for a while first." Chapter 382. In the Sacred Land, Feng Xingjian sat cross-legged in the training room, holding onto a translucent golden ball. Streams of light continued to flow out from the sunstone, gushing into Feng Xingjian's arm, strengthening the ether effulgence weapon in his hand. His ether effulgence weapon took the path of high-frequency waves. Once it took form, it would naturally be very powerful. However, his talent did not lie in this area. Therefore, his cultivation progress was not fast enough, and he did not spend much time on it. However, at this moment, as he continued to push the streams of light in the sunstone and merge them into the ether effulgence weapon, Feng Xingjian could sense that his high-frequency effulgence weapon, Silver Fox, was improving at an unbelievable speed. As the Silver Fox continued to improve, the frequency of its vibrations grew increasingly higher as well. Feng Xingjian opened up his 5 fingers and streams of water vapor condensed into a long sword. Then, silver fog surrounded it, and in the blink of an eye, it had encompassed the entire water sword and started to vibrate. 5,000 times per second, 7,000 times, 8,000 times, 12,000 times, 15,000 times. The frequency of the sword's vibrations grew increasingly higher, eventually stopping at a frequency of 20,000 times per second. The sunstone in Fang Xingjian's hand also lost all of its light, turning back into a dull stone. Right now, his ether divine art had also reached level 12, and it could vibrate at a frequency of 20,000 times per second. Seeing that the water sword in his hand was emitting a dense glow due to the slight vibrations, Fang Xingjian exerted a little force in his palm and sent the long sword plunging toward the ground. He did not use any strength at all, but the ground before the silver fox was slashed apart as if it were air. Looking at the level 12 effulgence weapon in his hand, Fang Xingjian broke into a satisfied smile. With the silver fox in his hand, even if he did not perform the prodigious demolition sword and just used the silver fox together with the unparalleled sword intent, Apex, his sword techniques would still possess a terrifying destructive prowess. He started to scan through the various killing techniques in his mind, deciding which sword technique he should cultivate next. In the next instant, he found his target, the white bone divine weapon. This was a sword technique that allowed one to pull out one's spine to perform sword techniques. It was also a killing technique that could continue to strengthen one's spine and bone's toughness. The reason why Fang Xingjian had taken a liking to this white bone longsword was that, due to the specialty of the heavenly sword sovereign, sword bones, his entire body could be said to have been born with sword bones. The toughness of his bones was comparable to that of superior divine weapons of the same level. It was a pity that these sword bones could only be used for defense and converting forces into sword force. Fang Xingjian Bone Divine Sword. He hoped that his sword bones would be, and the toughness of his bones would be equivalent to that of superior divine weapons of the same level. This was especially so for the specialty single sword world subjugation, which required him to wield a sword. In that case, after cultivating the white bone longsword, he would no longer need to condense water vapor or rocks into a sword every time he fought. He would be able to fight barehanded. Because his entire body was made of sword bones, he did not even need to pull out the bones in his body. He could fight directly. In fact, superior divine weapons were made from the remains of conferred knights. Since the dead could do it, the living could naturally do it too. Besides, Fang Xingjian's sword bone specialty saved him a lot of effort in strengthening his bones. His cultivation speed was much faster. Fang Xingjian looked at the sword technique and suddenly thought of something. I think the academy has this course. Of course, not everyone was as rich as Fang Xingjian, who could casually purchase superior divine weapons. Moreover, the white bone divine weapon could allow the weapon to strengthen along with the cultivator, making it extremely practical. Therefore, the academy also offered this course. One day later, in a hall in the Great Western Region Regional Academy, the teacher on the podium was explaining the cultivation method of the white bone divine weapon. Below the podium, more than 10 students were listening attentively. Fang Xingjian was among them. Learning was the greatest advantage of humans, and the efficiency of listening to a lecture was at least 2 times higher than self-study. With an experienced lecturer teaching, it was of course faster than if Fang Xingjian were to learn by himself. By the time the lecturer was halfway through his lecture, Fang Xingjian's white bone divine weapon had already reached level 6. He could feel that the bones throughout his body seemed to contain an endless sharp aura. At this moment, it was as if gunpowder had exploded, wanting to dash out from his body and go on a killing spree. Fang Xingjian easily suppressed the sharp aura of the sword bones while listening to the lecturer's explanation. Much of the experience regarding the white bone divine weapon had been accumulated over generations, and it was not something that Fang Xingjian could take into consideration by himself. This had nothing to do with talent. It was purely experience. On the other side of the podium, Wang Tiangang would occasionally glance in Fang Xingjian's direction. He had not expected that Fang Xingjian would also come to learn this white-bone divine weapon. This killing technique may seem like it's just an additional superior divine weapon, but in fact, it can strengthen one's bones and greatly increase the body's ability to withstand attacks. Moreover, the spine is the crux of exerting force. If one were to cultivate it into a superior divine weapon, there would be endless benefits. Looking at Fang Xingjian, Wang Tiangang would occasionally guess how Fang Xingjian's learning speed compared to his own. At this moment, many people walked into the hall. Wang Tiangang threw a casual glance and discovered that head of department James and the head of the sword arts team, Hops, were sitting next to Fang Xingjian. After a while, a few members of the higher management from the other faculties had also arrived and taken their seats in the hall. The students who had been listening to the lecture observed their surroundings in astonishment. They discovered that in less than 10 minutes, over 20 members of the academy's higher management had unknowingly taken up the hall. However, the students were conferred knights after all. Although they were astonished, they continued to listen to the lecture. It was only when the top person in the Great Western region, Governor Devitt, also took a seat behind Fang Xingjian that everyone could no longer remain calm. The lecturer on the rostrum also stopped and looked at Devitt with an inquiring gaze. The latter indicated for him to continue with the lecture, but everyone's attention was no longer on the lecture. All of their attention was focused on Fang Xingjian's surroundings. Wang Tiangang gritted his teeth and looked at Fang Xingjian. What has this lad done this time around? He activated his heaven's perception and tried his best to listen in on Fang Xingjian's location. In fact, most of the people in the hall were listening, and Fang Xingjian and the others did not mind. This was an open and above-board transaction to begin with, and there was no need to keep it secret. Moreover, it was impossible to keep such a huge sum of money a secret. Head of department James, who was next to Fang Xingjian, smiled bitterly and said, "Lad, you've really made us anxious. You're in too much of a hurry. For something like this, there's no difference whether it's done 2 days earlier or later." James shook his head and sighed, saying, "The scene in Pearl City is just hearsay, and there aren't many things left behind. However, to be honest, when I first saw that sword attack you left behind a few days ago, I was also shocked. Even I might not be able to achieve such a level of violence." Fang Xingjian smiled inwardly. The prowess of the terror ingurgitation was related to the environment. Back then, the Serene shrine had been underground, which meant that the weight of the earth had been added into that sword attack. Naturally, its prowess was world-shaking. Fang Xingjian asked 10 million. 10 million, split into 10 installments. This time around, the one who spoke was Governor Devitt. This top person in the Great Western region was looking at Fang Xingjian with a burning gaze that seemed to contain endless meanings. Chapter 383. Hearing the sum of 10 million, Wang Tiangong's body trembled. That was 10 million. With his status as a level 26 conferred knight, he would have to go all out to fork out 500,000. However, this time around, Governor Devitt wanted to give Fang Xingjian a total of 10 million. What kind of joke was this? He stared at Fang Xingjian, trying his best to listen, as if wanting to know what the other party was trying to trade. Hearing Devitt's words, Fang Xingjian shook his head and said, "It's already November, and there are still 8 months to the national selection next year. The money from 10 installments is useless to me." Hearing Fang Xingjian's words, the few of them exchanged glances. Over a month ago, they had been laughing at Fang Xingjian for overestimating himself and wanting to participate in the national selection. However, right now, Fang Xingjian was already discussing the flow of 10 million gold. Even a level 29 expert might not be able to achieve that sword attack from the Serene Shrine. Governor Devitt frowned and said, "Then I'll give it to you in 8 installments. 7 installments. All of them must be in your account before June next year." Devitt frowned, but when he thought of the ruins of the Serene Shrine, he forced himself to nod and said, "All right, but you must guarantee that you won't impart it to anyone else in the future. This will be equivalent to us buying the exclusive rights." "Sure, But may I be so bold as to ask, after you guys get your hands on the prodigious astral divine powers waves, who will you let cultivate it to? Fang Xingjian asked. Devitt said solemnly, of course we'll go through a strict selection process. We'll give it to those who have outstanding achievements and are loyal to the Empire. Simultaneously, a stream of information flowed into Fang Xingjian's mind. Haha, we're considered to be on the same side. This waves will naturally be given to those who are loyal to the second prince. With this mental cultivation method, we'll have an additional bargaining chip to go up against the first prince. It was the same as what Fang Xingjian had thought. If the second prince were to buy such a powerful waves, he would naturally only let those who were loyal to him cultivate it. As for how he would do it, he would set up more hurdles in terms of the cultivation conditions. It was impossible for every conferred knight in the academy to be able to cultivate it. It was equivalent to using the academy's money to groom his own subordinates. With the end of the discussion, Fang Xingjian and the academy's upper echelon left together. As for the specific method of settlement and the method of the waves transaction, they would naturally leave it to his subordinates. Not long after they left, the entire hall became lively. Prodigious astral divine powers waves. This is the divine legacy that Fang Xingjian comprehended on the Pantheon Monument. 10 million to buy waves. Isn't that too much of a waste? That's a divine level expert's waves. Moreover, the governor and the others aren't fools. To be able to buy it at such a high price, it can only be said that it's worth it. The waves of a divine level expert. I wonder how I can cultivate this waves. At the same time, conflicting emotions of jealousy and excitement flashed through Wang Tiangong's mind. Fang Xingjian, he actually obtained 10 million gold just like that. The academy's upper echelon has become rotten. However, Fang Xingjian, to think that you would even dare to hand over the waves of a divine level expert. This means that after learning this prodigious astral divine powers waves, I will completely surpass you. That night, in the training room in the sacred land, the bones throughout Fang Xingjian's body kept on making kacha-kacha sounds. Each of his joints was like a jet valve, continuously unleashing surging power. After completing level 10 of the white bone divine weapon, Fang Xingjian's body moved with a flash, piercing through the air and kicking the wall at 16 times that of supersonic speed. Violent sword force gushed out, tearing the wall apart and slashing through the air, charging toward the sky. Fang Xingjian sensed his physical body with satisfaction. Right now, all the sword bones throughout his body have been sacrificed in the same way as the white bone divine weapon. Originally, the most time-consuming part of the white bone divine weapon was the processing of the bones. However, to Fang Xingjian, this was the easiest part. It was because Fang Xingjian had the specialty sword bones, which allowed him to skip over many parts that strengthened his bones. Right now, his entire body was covered in swords. The specialty single sword world subjugation was constantly activated, constantly increasing his speed. Moreover, the sword bone specialty allowed him to transform his force, allowing him to casually attack with violent sword force. His punches and kicks were equivalent to him attacking with his sword. Taking in a deep breath, Fang Xingjian tapped out with a finger, using his hand in place of a sword and starting to cultivate his sword arts. 3 days later, the first sum of 1 million gold was transferred into Fang Xingjian's account. With the money, Fang Xingjian planned to start cultivating the 4th level of the Mystical Prince. This time around, other than the 400,000 gold for the materials, he had put up an anonymous bounty on the black market for all the other precious materials that he could not get his hands on. This caused the materials that could have been bought with 400,000 gold to be spent at 600,000 gold. However, at the very least, this saved Fang Xingjian's time. After all, he had less time and more money. Spending the royalties for the rebirth sword technique and the prodigious astral divine powers waves crazily allowed Fang Xingjian's abilities to rise at a crazy rate. After reaching the 4th level of the Mystical Prince, his aptitude increased once again. Both the speed at which he cultivated his sword arts and his ether synchronization rate increased at an even faster rate. He started to focus wholeheartedly on increasing his abilities. Over 10 days passed, and in late November, Fang Xingjian finally reached 60% ether synchronization rate and became a level 25 conferred knight. Concurrently, his prodigious astral divine powers waves also reached level 6. As his attributes rose, the prowess of terra ingurgitation increased once again. As for the zenith light sword formation, ether sword ripples, and prodigious demolition sword, they also became increasingly stronger. Fang Xingjian's sword arts cultivation became increasingly unfathomable. Therefore, Fang Xingjian's stats window became: Name: Fang Xingjian. Age: 17. Occupation: Heavenly Sword. Sovereign level: 25 Strength, 191 plus 13 Agility, 260 plus 13 Reaction, 159 Endurance, 136 Flexibility, 135 Ether Synchronization Rate. 60%. The attributes above come into effect once the prodigious astral divine powers waves is activated. Due to perfect muscles, plus 13 in strength and agility, 10% of the endurance attribute. Techniques: Boundaries Negation, level 40 Rebirth Sword Technique, level 40 New 9-Headed Dragon Sword Technique, level 40 Zenith Light Sword Formation, level 40 Ether Sword Ripples, level 40 Prodigious Demolition Sword, level 12 Ether Divine Art, White Bone Divine Weapon, Heaven's Volition Sword. Intent Specialties: Genius Swordsmanship, Elementary Survival Instinct, Internal Healing, Internal Training Sword. Specialist: Heightened Reflexes, Perfect Muscles, Single Sword World Subjugation, Elementary Berserkness, Unparalleled Sword Intent, Apex Sword Bones, Swordless Path, Darkness Sword Sense, Heavenly Sword Imprint Waves. Level 6 Prodigious Astral Divine Powers Waves Mental Cultivation Method. Level 7 Universal Sword Dominance Lunisolar with Heaven's Perception. Fang Xingjian sensed his physical body. He could see the wriggling of his white blood cells, as well as the continuous delivery of nutrients by his red blood cells. There had never been a moment where he could sense his physical body with such clarity. Fang Xingjian let out a long breath. He had finally reached level 25. What he needed to do next was to turn from a human into a god, condense specialty seeds step by step, and strengthen his physical body. The best shortcut for specialty seeds was heavenly and earthly treasures. Many heavenly and earthly treasures could allow the cultivator to gain specialties directly after being used. And right now, the thing that Fang Xingjian lacked the least was money. After deducting the money he had spent during this period of time, he still had 350,000 gold left. Even if he were to spend all of it, there would still be 1 million gold in his account next month. Then there would be 2 million gold the month after that, and 2 million gold the month after that, all the way until the final sum of 1 million gold in May next year. He would have enough money to squander and spend it all on his body. However, he still had no idea about his lifespan. By right, a conferred knight who had attained the physical body clarity at level 25 should be able to increase his lifespan. However, Fang Xingjian was unable to sense something like lifespan, and he did not know if he would still die 3 years later. Chapter 384. In the training room in the Sacred Land, Fang Xingjian was still trying to sense his own body. He first treated his eyes. The main reason was that when the poison had entered his brain back then, it had destroyed the parts related to his vision. However, he was now able to control his own cells and slowly treat his blindness. Although he could now see further with his heaven's perception, his blindness was still a flaw. If he left it untreated, it would affect his ability to condense specialty seeds. After 1 day and 1 night, when Fang Xingjian opened his eyes once again, they were pitch black. This was the effect of his specialty, Darkness Sword Sense, after his blindness had been treated. However, he controlled his vision cells and very quickly got rid of this abnormality, allowing him to appear no different from how he was before. Fang Xingjian then started to sense his specialties. He had 14 specialties to begin with, and now he could sense his body in all aspects. He could even control his body's cells, allowing him to change his physical body to a certain extent. This was different from when he was at level 23, where he could vaguely sense physical particles. That was a blurry feeling, and he could only sense it but not control it. Therefore, he could only absorb thunderbolts violently to strengthen the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces between the particles. Right now, his level 25 cell control ability allowed him to freely control the circulation of the cells in his body. Under his detailed senses, he could sense hints of strange light circulating throughout his body, continuously strengthening his powers. If he took a deeper look, he would discover that a total of 6 streams of aura were rising incessantly from his head, chest, arms, waist, and back. Specialties were the special abilities that one possessed after going through tough training in the outside world to stimulate the power of the specialty seeds in one's body. There were 1,440 internal specialties and 9,270 external specialties. Internal specialties referred to the 1,440 specialty seeds that all conferred knights could condense, while external specialties referred to the 9,270 specialties that were related to equipment. However, not all of them needed to be cultivated. For example, Fang Xingjian's unparalleled sword intent, Apex, Sword Bones, Swordless Path, Darkness Sword Sense, and Heavenly Sword Imprint were external specialties. Elementary Survival Instinct, Internal Healing, Internal Training, Sword Specialist, Heightened Reflexes, Perfect Muscles, and many others were internal specialties. To be able to condense 1,440 internal specialties and make one's physical body extremely strong meant that one had attained great perfection in condensing specialty seeds. This was something that conferred knights had always been pursuing. However, even after reaching level 29, it was still difficult for them to achieve it. The more specialty seeds one condenses, the stronger one's physical body will be. With the same 5 attributes, one will also be able to unleash a greater prowess. Recently, my Zenith Light Sword Formation, Prodigious Demolition Sword, and Ether Sword Ripples have all reached a bottleneck. I've synthesized many sets of killing techniques, but they haven't improved much. I'm afraid that without a few unrivaled sword techniques, I won't be able to improve any further. From now on, I might as well spend my energy on condensing specialty seeds. Before I obtain even more powerful sword techniques, I won't be able to cultivate sword arts for now. Thinking of this, Fang Xingjian walked out of the door. He was going to condense his specialty seeds. A day later, the room was filled with countless treasures of heaven and earth. 10 kilograms of dragon snake grass. It can greatly increase the user's strength. Combined with 152 other precious medicinal herbs, one can obtain the intermediate berserk ability. Robert introduced, there's also this bottle of abyss demonic blood. Using it as the main ingredient to undergo a bloodbath, one can improve further and obtain the advanced berserk ability. Fang Xingjian nodded. Looking at the various items in the room, he smiled. These items had cost him all 350,000, but they had also allowed him to condense at least 50 specialty seeds. If he were to rely solely on his own hard work, slowly controlling his cells to modify his physical body and obtain specialties, he would need to spend at least 2 to 3 years. Let's begin. Fang Xingjian picked up the dragon snake grass and started to combine it with the other medicinal herbs to undergo a medicinal bath. A few minutes later, he felt waves of medicinal effects gushing wildly into his body. He tried hard to control his cells, allowing the medicinal effects to penetrate deep into the specialty seeds in his chest, incessantly stimulating the powers of the specialty seeds. Right now, Fang Xingjian was able to control his cells to accelerate the stimulation of specialty seeds, and his elementary berserk ability continued to advance toward the intermediate berserk ability. This was a training at the cellular level, and it was many times more powerful than purely external cultivation and the stimulation from medicinal baths. Fang Xingjian could sense streams of weak aura slowly rising from the location of his heart. It was the aura of a new specialty seed. elementary berserk ability, intermediate berserk ability, and advanced berserk ability. A total of 3 specialty seeds were located at the location of his heart. The elementary berserk ability strengthened the cultivator's physical strength and recovery ability, stimulating 1 specialty seed. The intermediate berserk ability would stimulate a 2nd specialty seed, further strengthening one's physical strength and recovery ability. As long as one's body had sufficient energy, they would be able to recover their physical strength just by taking a breath. Their physical strength would be as strong as that of a ferocious beast. In the following days, Fang Xingjian almost never left his house. He focused all his efforts on condensing specialty seeds, tempering his attributes, and increasing his ether synchronization rate. Fang Xingjian continued to stay indoors until mid-December. Other than occasionally getting people to bring him the Knight's Handbook to take a look at the most cutting-edge sword arts research, he seemed to be cut off from the rest of the world. Even Robert and the others had only seen him once or twice. That was when December arrived and another million came into his account. Fang Xingjian wanted to cultivate the 5th level of the Mystical Prince and purchase new materials to condense specialties. The only person who came into contact with him the most was probably head of department James. It was because Fang Xingjian would often request for James to spar with him. However, after stepping into the 5th level of the Mystical Prince, Fang Xingjian's aptitude once again experienced a tremendous increase. His aura became increasingly deep and unfathomable. Even James, the governor from 2 generations ago, would sometimes be unable to tell if Fang Xingjian had used his full power when they fought. The only thing James could be sure of was that after Fang Xingjian had entered level 25, his abilities would change almost every day. It was as if he was increasing at an exponential rate. When ordinary people reached level 25, they would be able to condense specialty seeds and increase their abilities at a rapid rate. However, when compared to the current Fang Xingjian, that sort of rapid increase was like the difference between clouds and mud. However, with Fang Xingjian single-mindedly hiding in the sacred land to cultivate, some people started to feel anxious. In a small alley in the great western city, 2 silhouettes stood side by side. One of them said in an aged voice, "This Fang Xingjian hides in the sacred land all the time. There's no way for us to come into contact with him, let alone take him away. We've already waited for a month. It's impossible for the Lord to allow us to continue waiting like this." The person who spoke had a clear voice, and it seemed to be a lady. The old man said, "Then what should we do? We can't possibly barge into the regional academy, right? The regional academy is filled with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. There's even Governor James from 2 generations ago and Governor Devitt from this generation. It's impossible for us to barge in," the lady said. "Then the only way is to lure him out." "Lure him out? How?" the old man asked. "There's a good saying, hit the young, and the old will come. Fang Xingjian is the old, and those people under him are naturally the young. Moreover, it's not like he has no relatives or friends." The lady smiled. "I heard that he has a female disciple who's studying in a school in the great western city. If we do this, we won't alert the enemy, right?" The old man asked hesitantly. "It's just a woman. At Fang Xingjian's level, what kind of woman can he not have?" I heard that that female student was taught by Fang Xingjian in the past. If we capture her now, I don't believe that he won't come out. But with Governor Devitt around, then we'll think of a way. Even divine-level experts have times when their minds wander, let alone Devitt. There'll definitely be a chance." The old man stood under the light, revealing the brown skin and yellow eyes that were unique to people from the Sand Country. "In order to retrieve Lord Damarov's remains, this is the only way." In a luxurious manner in the great western city, a young master chuckled as he hugged a female servant. As he stroked her body, he smiled and said, "That Fang Xingjian has been hiding like a tortoise for over a month, unwilling to come out." The old man next to him bowed and said, "He's offended so many influences. Of course, he won't dare to come out easily. But I can't possibly continue wasting time with him like this." The young man shook his head. With his exquisite skin and rosy lips, he appeared extremely feminine. He said in a sharp voice, "The Archbishop has requested for me to return before the end of the year. What's the point of dragging things out like this? I can only think of a way to lure him out." Chapter 385. The feminine-looking young man looked at the beautiful maid in his arms and suddenly smiled. His right hand flashed like a series of afterimages, and he grabbed the maid's neck. At the next moment, endless pain flashed on the maid's face. She aged and shriveled up at a speed that could be seen by the naked eye, and her hair kept on turning white. Her eyes were filled with terror. She wanted to struggle, but she was unable to unleash any strength. However, the feminine-looking young man revealed an extremely comfortable expression. 2 streams of red appeared on his cheeks, and he trembled slightly, letting out a series of moans. The old butler lowered his head respectfully, as if he was used to this scene. It was only a short moment later when the beautiful maid turned into a dried-up corpse and dropped to the ground with a thud that the old man started to clean up the corpse. The feminine-looking young man broke into a satisfied smile. However, a short moment later, he opened his eyes and revealed a displeased expression. "This great western city is really troublesome. I have to be careful just to look for 2 people. If I were at the headquarters, I wouldn't have to go through so much trouble." The old butler said respectfully, "This great western city is just an undeveloped land that has been occupied by a group of heretics. They naturally don't understand divine might and divine grace." Heretics? However, these heretics produce a large number of talents every year. Their population has always been their advantage, the feminine-looking young man said. This Fang Xinjian has been praised by a few old men in the great western city to be the #1 genius that only appears once every few centuries. I wonder how good he is. The old butler smiled and said, "Of course, he can't be compared to young master. Young master is extremely knowledgeable and has been progressing valiantly in black magic. That Fang Xinjian probably won't be able to match up to you. Your boot-licking skills are too lousy." The feminine-looking young man laughed out loud and said, "But since Fang Xinjian was able to defeat Gudrun, it means that he does have some capabilities. However, he didn't have the fortune to study the grand path of black magic. Instead, he took the path of a knight. His nature is inferior to us, and it's useless no matter how great his talent is." Young master is right. Although Fang Xinjian's talent is still all right, his luck isn't that great. The feminine-looking young man shook his head. But numbers are also an advantage. If it wasn't because there are too many experts in the great western city, I would have barged into the academy to snatch them away. There would be no need to go through so much trouble. Now we have to think of a way to lure him out. Do you have any ideas? How could this old man have any ideas? We still have to rely on young master's intelligence and wisdom. You old fool. The feminine-looking young man's lips twitched as he said, "It's just the same old thing. Check if there's anyone in the great western city who is close to Fang Xinjian." Understood. Governor Devitt and the other 2 old fellows are also very troublesome. Send people to gather more information. It's best if you can take action when they are not around. A few days later, in a restaurant in the great western city. At this time, the restaurant was very lively. There was even a long queue at the entrance. Obviously, business was very good. This was the restaurant that Diana had opened with the support of Fang Xinjian. Other than the grilled meat that Diana originally had, she also sold many of the special dishes that she had developed during this period of time. After being opened for over a month, the restaurant had attracted countless customers. There were even conferred knights who came because of its reputation. Right now, the kitchen was very busy. Diana was like a tyrant, commanding everyone to do their own work. "Mike, hurry up. Where's the seafood soup? Are you thinking of waiting for the customers for dinner?" "Jason, why is the asparagus so hard?" Diana spat the asparagus in her mouth into the trash bin. "Didn't you cook it before frying it? Can you imagine how the customers would look like when they cut this plate of asparagus?" Taking another dish, Diana said directly, "Why are there so many different colors in the fried eggs?" I won't be bringing this out. My God, Mike, it's just a plate of fried eggs. How hard can it be? Take it back and redo it. Diana clapped her hands and bellowed. Everyone work hard. If you continue making mistakes like this, our restaurant will close down tomorrow. Everyone bellowed. Yes, head chef. Although the entire kitchen was in a hurry under Diana's command, it was also very orderly. The bellows, shouts, the clashing of kitchen utensils, the sound of the flames and the wind made it seem as if there was a war going on. However, under Diana's command, the standard of the dishes was maintained. Diana, who was usually gentle and elegant, was no longer as gentle as before. She was like a queen who ruled over her own kingdom. Just then, the head waiter walked in, came up to Diana, and said, "The customers at table 12 are very satisfied with the dishes and would like to meet you." Diana said impatiently, "I don't have time, Billy. Can't you see that I'm very busy?" The head waiter smiled helplessly. They seem to have connections with the municipal government. It's best that you meet them. Diana let out a breath, took off her apron, and followed the head waiter out to the customers at table 12. A feminine-looking young man stood up with a face full of smiles. "Head Chef Diana, right? I really like the dishes you cook." He put out his hand, and although Diana frowned, she still shook it. "Thank you." However, at the next moment, she felt the other party's finger gently brushing past her palm. She abruptly put out her hand and glared at the young man furiously. "Do you have anything else? Haha, didn't anyone say that your beauty is above your culinary skills?" Diana frowned and said coldly, "If there's nothing else, I'll be returning to the kitchen to get busy." The feminine-looking young man smiled. "It's nothing. I'm just here to recognize your face in case I get the wrong person in the future." "Haha, sorry to disturb Miss Diana." A hint of doubt appeared on Diana's face. She threw a final glance at the feminine-looking young man and thought of the busy kitchen. He was amazing. Looking at the puzzled Diana, the feminine-looking young man picked up a piece of roasted meat and said as he ate, "Do I lack a chef? Young master, you're thinking of bringing her back? That'll really be her good fortune. Hee, let's lure Fong Xinjian out first." Elsewhere, at the entrance of the night school, a lady dressed in black robes hid at the entrance of an alley, looking at the students who kept on coming out from the school. Suddenly, her gaze narrowed as she looked toward the few students who had come out from the school. The girl in the lead was bouncing around, filled with youthful vigor. It was the female disciple Fong Xinjian had taken in before, Lilia. The lady in black robes asked in a cold voice, "She's Lilia?" She then threw a glance toward the guy behind Lilia and asked, "Who's that guy?" Next to her, a young fatso who was in his teens nodded in fear. "She's Lilia, and the one behind her is Kite. I heard that he already has the abilities of a quasi-knight and has been chasing after Lilia all this while." The corners of the lady in black robes' lips curled up. "You guys are still learning how to date at such a young age? What kind of background does this guy have?" "He's a hereditary aristocrat. I heard that Kite's clan has produced a conferred knight in the past." The lady in black robes nodded slightly and then headed deeper into the alley. A series of dazed expressions flashed on the young fatso's face, as if he could no longer remember what he had said. Chapter 386. A few days later, in the middle of the night, after Fong Xinjian had been in seclusion for over a month, a wave arrived at the great western city. However, no one had expected that this wave would create a huge wave within such a short period of time, shocking everyone. At this moment, the governor's manor was encompassed in darkness. A silhouette entered through the main door, sending all the guards flying, and then sat down before the number one person in the Great Western region, Governor Devitt. Governor Devitt looked coldly at the silhouette before him and said calmly, "Dark Knight, you're charging into the governor's manor. Are you trying to rebel?" The person who had come was one of the first prince's clones from Hell, an existence that represented the powers of darkness in Hell. He was a top-notch second transition, level 29 expert, the Dark Knight. A few seconds after he barged in, over 5 conferred knights arrived outside the office and surrounded him. The Dark Knight, who was dressed in black armor and covered in black fog, smiled, revealing a pair of white teeth. I wouldn't dare. I just have some things to discuss with you, Governor. Governor Devitt furrowed his brows and asked, "What is it?" The Dark Knight smiled and said, "The representative from the Holy See of Truth has arrived at the palace. The main reason for their visit is for the martial techniques grading plan. Lord Holy Orzen has recommended Feng Xingjian, so, of course, he has to make a trip to the palace." How could Devitt possibly allow Feng Xingjian to head to the center? He said directly, "Xingjian is currently cultivating in seclusion and probably won't be able to make it." The Dark Knight asked, "It's just a student who is cultivating in seclusion. Even Governor can't get him to come out?" The Great Western region respects the wise and won't do whatever they want with violence. Governor Devitt threw a mocking glance at the Dark Knight and said, "If there's nothing else, you can leave." The Dark Knight smiled coldly and said, "Feng Xingjian is just a student. Do you think that the important characters from the Holy See of Truth and the central government will give in to him?" Devitt said, "Xingjian's seclusion has entered a critical juncture. How can we disturb him? Don't you know how dangerous the cultivation of a conferred knight is? If there's a slight mistake and he cannot withstand the influx of information, a genius might turn into a lunatic. Can you bear the responsibility?" The Dark Knight said in disdain, "He's just a student. Lord Governor, don't praise him too highly." Devitt laughed out loud and said, "A student who can decipher the Pantheon Monument, invent the rebirth sword technique, and rise to second transition level 25 within a few months. How can he just be a genius? I'm afraid that in another year or two, you won't be a match for the Black Knight." The Dark Knight let out a cold snort and said, "Since that's the case, then I'll have to wait for a while. His First Highness has said that I won't be returning until Feng Xingjian arrives." This time, the nobles of the church specifically asked for Feng Xingjian. "I can't just return empty-handed." Governor Devitt looked coldly at the Dark Knight, contemplating the intentions behind his actions. Was it Feng Xingjian's actions in the Gao family that had angered the First Prince? Was it the sale of the prodigious astral divine powers waves that had stirred up the First Prince's greed? Or could it be that the church really wanted to meet him, and the other party was just doing his job? Not long later, the head of the sword arts team, Hops, and the governor from 2 generations ago, James, also arrived. The 3 top-notch experts of the great western city sat together, watching over the Dark Knight. After all, the Dark Knight was the First Prince's top general, and his abilities were a notch higher than Devitt's. Moreover, he also had the First Prince's clone in his body. If the 3 of them did not appear together, it would be impossible for them to have complete confidence in keeping him in check. Elsewhere, Zhou Xingwen came to the door of the training room anxiously. He knocked on the door, and seeing that there was no response, he could not help but shout, "Xingjian, are you there? Something big has happened. It's extremely urgent. Let me meet you quickly." He shouted outside for an entire half an hour. Just as he was feeling disheartened and felt that Feng Xingjian would not come out, the door to the training room opened with a bang. Zhou Xingwen's face lit up, and he stepped in. However, he had just arrived at the door when he felt a gush of cold air gushing toward him. The wind brushed against his face, feeling as if there were knives scraping against him. An unexplainable sense of terror gushed up in his heart, making him suddenly feel as if his life was not in his hands. Holding his breath and then taking a few deep breaths, Zhou Xingwen thought to himself in astonishment, "Xingjian's cultivation has increased again. He hasn't even gotten close, but he's already giving me the feeling that I'm not in control of my own life and death." However, Zhou Xingwen was a conferred knight after all. After calming down his emotions, he continued to head into the training room. On his way there, he saw that the ground and the walls of the training room were filled with deep sword marks. The auras from the marks were extremely sharp and deep, causing Zhou Xingwen's heart to palpitate. He felt as if he was walking on the tip of a sword. Drenched in cold sweat, he walked to the training ground and saw Feng Xingjian sitting cross-legged with his back facing him. Feng Xingjian's voice rang out, "Have you found a people from the Serene shrine?" Zhou Xingwen was stunned for a moment. He had not expected that Feng Xingjian's first question would be this. He was stunned for a moment before saying, "Not yet. These people from the Terrene Shrine have hidden themselves too well. It won't be possible to find them within a short period of time. Sigh. Then find me some experts from the Great Western region. They'll deserve to die, Fang Xingjian said with a sigh. Zhou Xingwen asked puzzledly, Sir, why do you want to find such people? I want to test my sword, Fang Xingjian said. As Fang Xingjian spoke, there seemed to be the sound of metal clashing. It was as if countless swords had clashed together. Zhou Xingwen asked, Can't we look for the head of department and the others? There are always complicated relationships behind every conferred knight. It's not a good omen to kill them. Fang Xingjian said calmly, Right now, I haven't fully mastered my powers yet. I'm afraid that I might accidentally injure them. Zhou Xingwen looked at Fang Xingjian in a daze, as if he did not understand what Fang Xingjian was saying. Afraid that he might accidentally injure head of department James? James was a top-notch second transition, level 29 expert. Had Fang Xingjian really improved tremendously during this period of seclusion, or had he been too arrogant? Just as Zhou Xingwen was in a daze, Fang Xingjian turned around. Seeing Fang Xingjian's gaze, Zhou Xingwen could not help but tear up. It was as if there was an intense sword light encompassing his entire body, and he felt as if there were many long swords caressing the surface of his body. He could not help but lower his head, not daring to meet Fang Xingjian's gaze. To what extent has Xingjian's cultivation improved? With a hint of astonishment on his face, he asked, Xingjian, what level has your cultivation reached? I'm almost at level 27. Fang Xingjian said calmly, but I've improved too quickly. I'm afraid that someone will die the moment I attack. I need to find someone to test my sword skills on. Someone would die the moment he attacked. Zhou Xingwen felt that there was a strong stench of blood in this sentence. It had only been 6 months since Fang Xingjian had entered the regional academy. To think that he was about to reach level 27 in less than half a year. It was unbelievable. Fang Xingjian asked again, What are you here for? Zhou Xingwen sighed. The moment he saw Fang Xingjian, his mind had been taken over by him, and the initiative had fallen into his hands. Whatever the other party said, Zhou Xingwen had almost forgotten why he had come here. The Dark Knight is here. Right now, the governor, the head of department, and Master Hops are keeping an eye on him. They're afraid that the first prince wants to harm you, so they asked me to specially inform you. Chapter 387. Oh, the Dark Knight is here. Fang Xingjian's eyes lit up as he thought of that powerful figure who had once appeared in the sky above the regional selections arena. It was the first prince's most valiant general, a second transition, level 29 knight at the pinnacle. Even amongst the level 29 experts, he was considered to be in the second tier, only slightly weaker than the first prince's conferred knights who were aiming for the divine level. What a good opponent. Fang Xingjian stood up, and streams of sword light flashed in the air. The surrounding walls continued to shatter, and Zhou Xingwen felt his heart twitching violently. He looked at Fang Xingjian and could not help but say, Xingjian, the Dark Knight, is the Empire's conferred knight, and he's being controlled by the first prince's clone. We mustn't start a battle so easily. Fang Xingjian did not care so much, and the corners of his lips curled up into an excited smile. After taking a few steps forward, he frowned and said, That's not right. Why would the Dark Knight come so openly? Could it be that place? I had wanted to wait for a while longer, but it seems that I'll have to meet him first. Zhou Xingwen asked puzzledly, Xingjian, who are you talking about? However, after asking for a while, he did not hear any sound. He lifted his head in puzzlement and saw that there was nothing before him. Fang Xingjian had disappeared without him knowing. This method of appearing and disappearing like a ghost made Zhou Xingwen's heart palpitate even more. He walked out, puzzled, and thought about what Fang Xingjian had said earlier. Attract attention? Could it be? No matter what, I'll have to take precautions. Thinking of this, he headed for Anderson's room. This was a conferred knight who had been running errands for Fang Xingjian, just like him. Over the past few months, Anderson had become very familiar with this conferred knight. Although he did not like Anderson's arrogance, Fang Xingjian only had 2 conferred knights under him. In the dungeon, Sword Saint Sasa's body was still engulfed, surrounded, and suppressed by metal. It was as if he had been filled with cement, and he was unable to move. Despite this, the blood in his body continued to seethe incessantly like a great river, emitting rumbling sounds. With an ether particle density of 1%, and without eating or drinking, his body's condition was even better than before. Above his chest, there was a mass of blood-red liquid. This mass of liquid was like Sword Saint Sasa's second heart, pulsating along with his heart. Traces of red constantly dripped down from the pulsating liquid and fused with Sword Saint Sasa's heart. Then, following the blood flow throughout his body became stronger and stronger. Sword Saint Sasa's lips curled up slightly as he sensed his body's continuous strengthening. He recalled the scenes of this period of time. That day, Sword Saint Sasa continued to absorb the energy from ether particles as per usual, reducing the depletion of his body circulation. However, just then, a stream of information flowed into his mind. "Sasa, do you want to go out?" Sasa's heart skipped a beat. Although he really wanted to leave this dungeon that never saw the light of day, he still suppressed his excitement and replied, "Who are you?" "I'm the first prince's man." The other party went straight to the point. "Without my help, you can forget about leaving the great western city. Do you want to stay here for the rest of your life, watching as your body gradually decays? Or do you want to follow the first prince, build up your achievements, leave your name in history, and even step into the true divine level?" "Ha, divine level? The first prince himself isn't even at the divine level. How can he talk about helping others to step into the divine level?" That voice said coldly, "How can you understand the first prince's wisdom? His Highness cultivates the 36 Hells maps and wishes to reach an unprecedented realm. Not only does he want to transform into 36 top-notch confer knights, but he also wants to push all of these conferred knights to the divine level." "What? He wants to push all 36 conferred knights to the divine level?" Hearing this news, Sword Saint Sasa felt that it was extremely ridiculous. What does he think the divine level is? That it can be mass-produced? To forcefully open up an unprecedented path when there's no other path to take. This is the first prince's boldness. That person continued, "Moreover, the first prince's background is so deep that it's not something you can imagine." Sasa did not reply and merely smiled coldly. It was true that staying in the dungeon was a life of total darkness. However, if he were to go out and sign the Hell's Map, he would not be able to control his own life and death. That voice did not say anything else and disappeared not long after. However, a week later, that person came over to ask about it again. Just like that person would occasionally come to visit Sasa and tell him about the situation in the outside world. And as the time he spent in the dungeon grew longer, Sasa's emotions grew increasingly irritated. This was especially so when the other party brought news about Feng Xingjian. Sasa became even more irritated. 10 million? A single wave sold for 10 million? Sasa's face contorted, and his eyes seemed as if they were going to spew fire. How corrupt! The country's money has entered Feng Xingjian's pockets just like that. These people really deserve to die. Haha, how is it? With Feng Xingjian's current progress, it probably won't be long before he'll be able to surpass you. Aren't you anxious? It's 10 million gold. How many heavenly and earthly treasures can he buy? How much can he raise his abilities? Sasa did not reply to the other party's question. Instead, his countenance became increasingly savage. Fury, vengeance, and jealousy were like a snake, engulfing his heart incessantly. Then for the next month or so, the other party did not come again. It had been an entire month without any news from the other party. Moreover, he had been in this dark dungeon. Every minute and every second felt so long, causing him to feel increasingly irritated. If it were in the past, with Sword Saint Sasa's cultivation, he would definitely not be like this. However, the failure of the Heaven's Volition Sword Intent, his failure against Feng Xingjian, as well as Feng Xingjian's repeated successes, their effects had all been magnified in this dark dungeon. If it were an ordinary person, they would have long since gone crazy in a state of complete darkness with nothing around them. Although Sasa had persevered for a very long time, he had only gotten increasingly irritated and uneasy. However, the people sent by the first prince sped up this process, causing his mental state to become even more unbalanced. Finally, a few days ago, when the other party came once again, Sasa finally agreed to join the first prince's side. Haha, Sasa, you won't regret this. At the next moment, hints of red liquid seeped through the metal and flowed into his body. This is the fresh blood of a divine-level ferocious beast. Moreover, it's not ordinary blood. It's the blood essence that ferocious beasts condense for their descendants. Even they can't condense it casually. It contains divine-level powers. Absorb it well and integrate it into your body. It'll be able to push your abilities forward once again. If you can absorb all of it, you'll be able to increase your potential by at least 10 million points. You'll also be able to cultivate the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces in your body to the limits below the divine level, allowing your body's toughness to reach the level of a level 29 superior divine weapon. With that, breaking out of this dungeon will be nothing. Sensing the drops of fresh blood seeping into his body, Sasa's heart trembled furiously. Divine-level ferocious beast's blood essence. To think that the first prince has something like this? Chapter 388. Divine-level ferocious beasts were even rarer existences than divine-level experts. It was because animals were animals after all. Even though their bodies had gone through mutations, and they possessed all sorts of powerful physiques and special abilities, their brains were still not comparable to that of humans, and they did not have the level of intelligence that humans had. It was impossible to attain the divine level without intelligence. Therefore, divine-level ferocious beasts were much rarer than divine-level human experts. However, once a ferocious beast managed to attain the divine level, its body's toughness and tonnage were both there. It would usually be more powerful than most divine-level experts. Therefore, not only were divine-level ferocious beasts powerful, but they were also very powerful. Their blood was extremely difficult to obtain, let alone specially condensed blood essence. Right now, in order to win him over, the first prince had bestowed him the blood essence of a divine-level ferocious beast. This was the behavior of a nouveau riche. Sword Saint Sasa looked greedily at the divine-level blood essence floating on his chest, feeling extremely excited. Ah, very good. My body is gradually getting used to the burden of this divine-level blood. I'll be able to absorb all of it today. His Highness should have already diverted the governor's attention. I'll be able to break out of the dungeon tonight and meet up with His Highness's men. Although he had not signed the Hell's Map, thinking of the information that the first prince had shown him after bestowing him the blood, Sasa was now completely devoted to the first prince. After I've absorbed the divine blood and broken out of the dungeon, I'll go look for Feng Xinjian and force him to reveal the Heaven's Volition sword intent. If I can offer it to His Highness, it'll be a great merit. Thinking of how he could finally suppress Feng Xinjian, make him kneel down and beg for mercy, and then snatch away his Heaven's Volition sword intent, Sasa felt extremely exhilarated. However, just then, the metal surrounding him suddenly trembled. Then, under Sword Saint Sasa's astonished gaze, the metal became soft, and the metal above his head kept on disappearing, exposing his head. Sasa understood that the metal in the dungeon was known as aqua gold. It was a strange metal that could freely change between liquid and solid state. When it was in the liquid state, it could be controlled freely. When it was in the solid state, it could be said to be indestructible. It was a good material to imprison experts. Moreover, the aqua gold on Sasa's body weighed several million tons. In an environment with an ether particle density of 1%, it would be hard for him to break out. However, as long as he absorbed the god's blood, his body would become extremely strong and he would be able to break free. Who's here? Under Sasa's astonished gaze, Feng Xinjian slowly appeared in front of him. He stood on the solid water gold and looked at Sasa, whose head was exposed. Feng Xinjian. At that moment, his heart was filled with killing intent. He wanted nothing more than to beat Fang Xinjian into kneeling and begging for mercy. However, he remembered that he had not finished absorbing the god's blood, so he immediately suppressed the killing intent in his heart. He looked at Fang Xinjian coldly and said, "Humph, why did you think of coming to see me? You even let go of the aqua gold. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you with a single sword attack?" However, Fang Xinjian paid no heed to Sasa's words at all. The combination of the 5th level of the mystical prince and the number 1 sword arts talent he already had in the world had produced a terrifying chemical reaction. His aptitude had already reached an unbelievable level. Within 1.5 months, not only had he condensed over 100 internal specialty seeds, but he had also gained the additional bonus of having leveled up to level 26. Additionally, his prodigious astral divine powers waves had also reached level 7. His physical body had become terrifyingly strong. However, what was even more terrifying was his sword arts. When a conferred knight stepped into level 26, their ether synchronization rate would reach over 70%, and their heaven's perception would be able to penetrate deeper into the microscopic world. They would be able to destroy the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces between physical particles. They would be able to cause great damage to all physical substances, and their destructive prowess would be directed at the physical particles that form physical substances. Moreover, with Fang Xinjian's unrivaled aptitude, he was able to turn the impossible into the possible. He integrated such means into his Zenith Light sword formation, Ether sword ripples, and prodigious demolition sword. The only pity was that this would only be effective within a 10-meter radius of his heaven's perception. Lastly, in the cultivation of the prodigious demolition sword, Fang Xinjian broke through the bottleneck and advanced further. After cultivating the white bone divine weapon, his entire body was made up of swords. Therefore, with his unrivaled aptitude, he changed the prodigious demolition sword into the prodigious demolition sword physique. The demolition sword light could encompass his entire body, truly becoming one with the sword. He could then use the demolition sword light on the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces between physical particles, cutting through almost everything in the world. Right now, his attributes had also become: name Fang Xinjian, age 17, occupation Heavenly Sword Sovereign, level 26, strength 213 plus 15 agility, 273 plus 15 agility, 273 plus 15 reaction, 172 endurance, 150 ether synchronization rate, 78%. The attributes above come into effect once the prodigious astral divine powers waves is activated. Due to perfect muscles, plus 15 in strength and agility, 10% of the endurance attribute. Due to perfect muscles, plus 15 in strength and agility techniques. Boundaries negation, level 40 rebirth sword technique, level 40 new 9-headed dragon sword technique, level 40 zenith light sword formation, level 40 ether sword ripples, level 40 prodigious demolition sword physique, level 12 ether divine art, white bone divine weapon, Heaven's Volition Sword Intent Waves, level 7 prodigious astral divine powers. Waves Mental Cultivation Method, level 7 Universal Sword Dominance, Lunisolar Mental Cultivation Method, level 7 Universal Sword Dominance, Lunisolar. With Fang Xinjian's terrifying abilities, even the Heavenly Abyss Annihilation Armor had been completely suppressed. He would be able to receive 50% of Damarov's powers at any time, giving him even more confidence to challenge level 29 experts. Looking at Sword Saint Sasa, who only had his head exposed, Fang Xinjian said calmly, "Level 27 conferred knights can break through physical particles and unleash the power of the physical particles in their bodies. Level 28 conferred knights are even more amazing. They can directly absorb the power of ether particles to replenish their depleted energy. Most of the useless organs will also be eliminated and turned into ether organs that can absorb and store ether particles. Their battle prowess will be stronger, and they will be less reliant on the external world. Their bodies will also be even more inhuman, and they will continue to advance towards the divine level. Level 29 conferred knights are even more terrifying. Their ether synchronization rate will reach 100%, and they will be able to successfully synthesize any martial techniques in one go. However, this is not the most amazing thing. It's that their ether synchronization rate has reached the microscopic level, and their control over their bodies surpasses the understanding of ordinary people. Fang Xingjian looked at Sasa, smiled, and said, "Head of Department James and I have often engaged in actual combat, so we have a good understanding of level 29 experts. At your level, although you won't possess powerful battle prowess like level 25, 26, or 27, you're almost unkillable. Level 29 conferred knights will have heaven's perception that has truly stepped into the microscopic world. They will be able to control their entire body and regenerate it. Other than the brain, which is their weakness, the rest of their body won't be harmed in the slightest, even if they were to be turned into ashes. Moreover, with such control over their bodies and their deep understanding of the microscopic world, it will be even more terrifying when used to temper their bodies. They will be able to cultivate heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces with greater ease, and their bodies will truly reach the state of being indestructible. The speed at which they condense specialty seeds will be even faster, and their ability to destroy physical particles and refine energy will also be even more exquisite. At level 29, the various abilities obtained by conferred knights will be truly unleashed. It can be said that they have grasped and surpassed the abilities obtained by conferred knights at each level. They can raise the toughness of their bodies to the level of a level 29 superior divine weapon, and they can raise their physical destructive prowess to the level of a level 29 superior divine weapon. The number of physical particles in their bodies will also truly have the chance to rise to 1.08 billion, and so on and so forth. They will be extremely powerful in all aspects. Sasa looked at Fang Xingjian coldly and said, "What on earth are you trying to say?" "Nothing much. I just feel that you're too young and haven't been able to unleash your potential at level 29. But with that, you've become the best whetstone for me." Fang Xingjian walked slowly up to Sasa and suddenly shouted upward, "Unseal the remaining water metals as well." Chapter 389. Fang Xingjian's position was several hundred meters deep from the ground. After he gave the order, a reply immediately came from above. "Sir, the headmaster has ordered us not to unseal Sasa. He's a level 29 conferred knight." Fang Xingjian said coldly, "Let him go." But streams of sword light soared into the air, and not long later, a series of astonished cries rang out. Fang Xingjian said, "Let him go. If there's a problem, I'll take full responsibility." Not long later, the aqueous gold under Fang Xingjian's feet dissipated like ripples, revealing Sword Saint Sasa's body. With all the restraints on his body gone, Sasa let out a deep breath. He stared coldly at Fang Xingjian and said, "Very well. How do you want to die? On the account that you let me go, I can give you a quick death." Concurrently, his mind spun rapidly. What is this Fang Xingjian up to? Could it be that James and the others are nearby? Is someone ambushing me? However, no matter how much his heaven's perception observed the light waves and sound waves, he could not sense the presence of other experts. On the other side, Fang Xingjian smiled, and then his body suddenly disappeared. Violent killing intent gushed forth, and Sasa could not react in time. He could only leap backward with all his might, and a wound was torn open on his chest. The skin on his chest had been sliced open, but it was still unable to completely cut through the muscles within. He looked at the injury on his chest and brushed past it with a light palm. The injury had already regenerated, and there was not even a hint of a scar on his body. Undying and indestructible. It really lives up to its name. It was unknown when Fang Xingjian had once again appeared at his original position. Sword intents gushed forth from his eyes, locking onto Sasa. Sasa said calmly, My heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces have already condensed my body's toughness to that of a level 25 divine weapon. To think that you're able to slice open the skin with your bare hands? You've stepped into level 26? You can attack the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces directly? Level 24 conferred knights could strengthen the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces between physical particles, and their body's toughness would increase tremendously. A level 26 conferred knight could directly attack the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces of physical matter, splitting up physical particles and destroying their structure. This spear and shield were extremely sharp. However, only those who had reached the pinnacle of level 29 and their ether synchronization rate had reached 100% would be able to enter deep into it, cultivate their body's toughness to the point where it was comparable to a level 29 superior divine weapon, and increase their physical attacks to the point where they could destroy a level 29 superior divine weapon. Even at level 24 and level 26, there was only a vague increase in power. It was impossible for one to have the most precise control like when one's ether synchronization rate reached 100%. But now, Feng Xingjian could barely cut open his skin. From Sasa's point of view, you must have reached level 26. I didn't expect your cultivation to have reached such a level. If that's the case, I can't let you live. At the next moment, Sasa used his fingers as a sword and dashed out, appearing before Feng Xingjian. With a tap of his finger, it was as if a treasured sword had been unsheathed, bringing along streams of cold light as it pierced toward Feng Xingjian's forehead. Faced with this, Feng Xingjian did not back down either. He punched out towards Sasa's sword fingers, and the force from his fist turned into a seething sword force, clashing against Sasa's sword fingers with a loud boom. Seething powers burst out from the two of them, turning into streams of seething air currents. Electricity flashed incessantly on Feng Xingjian's fist and Sasa's fingers. A hint of astonishment flashed on Sasa's face. He tapped out repeatedly with his sword fingers, bringing along streams of starlight that swept out wildly. However, they were all blocked by Feng Xingjian's punches. However, the more Feng Xingjian fought, the more carefree he became. As he let out a long howl, his fists danced about, bringing along violent powers that gushed out towards Sasa like the mountains and seas. Many cracks continued to appear on the ground from the repercussions, and the ground trembled as if there was a small-scale earthquake. Level 29 Confer Knights had microscopic bodies. When they circulated their bodies at full power, they could continue to strengthen the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces in their bodies. They could also continue to attack the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces between the physical particles in their opponent's bodies. Regardless of whether it was for attack or defense, they could be said to target the intrinsic nature of physical structures. For example, the battle between Feng Xingjian and Sasa seemed to be a clash of physical bodies. However, each time they fought, it was actually the repeated collisions of physical particles, continuously depleting the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces in each other's bodies. Once the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces between one's physical particles were weakened, then the physical body would collapse. On the surface, it would look like one's limbs had been broken or one's tendons had been broken. This meant that as long as they had sufficient energy in their bodies, they would be able to maintain the toughness of their bodies. Bang, 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 bang. After a series of quick attacks, Sasa felt that Feng Xingjian's sword arts were exquisite. Feng Xingjian's 5 dimensions were in no way inferior to Sasa's. Sasa was unable to gain any advantage in terms of his moves and could only fight head-on. However, with the reinforcement from the 5th level of the Mystical Prince and the world's best sword user talent, the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces in Feng Xingjian's body were in no way inferior to Sasa's. Sasa clashed head-on with Feng Xingjian and realized that their bodies were on par with each other. To think that he was unable to take Feng Xingjian down by force With a furious bellow, the auras from 500 specialty seeds rose up from all over Sasa's body. Over 100,000 physical particles exploded abruptly, refining an endless amount of small world's power. His extremely powerful physical body was instantly unleashed explosively. Taking a step forward, the earth trembled, the atmosphere howled, and the surrounding air trembled crazily. It was as if even the world was astonished by his violent power. An astonishing martial will swept into Fang Xingjian's body, but it was exploded by the heaven's volition sword intent. Fang Xingjian, you're courting death today. Oof. With a cold snort, the auras from the 102 specialty seeds in Fang Xingjian's body also rose up. It was as if several tens of thousands of engines had been activated at the same time, seething powers gushing out. Concurrently, many pieces of scales and supporting force fields rose up, and the surrounding air exploded with a boom. The Heavenly Abyss Annihilation Armor was unleashed at full power, and as the earth trembled crazily, 50% of Damarov's powers were channeled into Fang Xingjian's body. Die! Sword Saint Sasa's body disappeared with a flash, and the two of them collided fiercely once again. The violent powers seemed to have turned the entire space into a state of chaos. A series of explosions rang out incessantly, and amidst the tremors and tremors, the buildings on the surface of the ground started to sink and collapse. It was as if there were several 100,000 kilograms of explosives exploding consecutively under the ground. Terrifying whistling sounds shocked the entire academy, and countless people rushed in the direction of the battlefield. With a boom, the two fists collided. Fang Xingjian did not move at all, but Sasa felt as if his entire body was being swept by a tremendous force. It was as if he had been pierced by several tens or hundreds of swords. It was extremely painful, and he only managed to dissipate all the power after retreating over 10 steps. My ether synchronization rate has reached 100%, which is why I've been able to cultivate the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces in depth, pushing the toughness of my body to the level of a level 25 divine weapon. What's Fang Xingjian's ether synchronization rate? Why is his body slightly stronger than mine? Chapter 390. Level 26 conferred knights could attack physical structures directly. However, with a level 26 ether synchronization rate, they would only be able to damage roughly and vaguely. Only level 29 conferred knights will be able to accurately damage physical structures. It could be said that they would be able to hit wherever they wanted. If they continued to cultivate, they would even be able to destroy level 29 superior divine weapons. In short, other than being undying and indestructible, level 29 conferred knights also possessed abilities that surpassed those of other conferred knights at each level. However, this iron rule had been broken by Fang Xingjian. Sasa clenched his teeth and looked at Fang Xingjian in disbelief. However, this was still not enough to make Sasa give up. The strongest aspect of a level 29 expert was still their almost undying and indestructible physical bodies. Moreover, Sasa had not gone all out yet. Sasa had only wanted to get rid of Fang Xingjian casually. However, Fang Xingjian had improved by leaps and bounds over the past few months and was now able to exchange blows with him barehanded. Sasa let out a cold laugh and took in a deep breath. The divine blood in his body was completely absorbed into his heart, and streams of seething power were channeled into his body. He then performed his killing technique. With a tap of his finger, invisible sword chis were activated. Wherever they passed by, everything would be destroyed, and everything would be broken down into the most basic physical particles. A level 29 conferred knight's casual attack will be directed at the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces. When they performed their unique killing technique, which they had synthesized countless techniques through this method, it would be even more terrifying. However, faced with this terrifying sword attack, Fang Xingjian also activated the prodigious demolition sword physique, and demolition sword light encompassed his entire arm. Clenching his 5 fingers tightly, Fang Xingjian neither dodged nor dodged. Instead, he punched out head-on against the invisible sword cheese. Under Sasa's astonished gaze, Fang Xingjian's fist pushed forward layer by layer, bringing along an extremely powerful force. It blasted away the invisible sword cheese, smashing on Sasa's chest and then passing through it. The thumping sound of a heartbeat rang out incessantly. Fang Xingjian was holding on Sasa's blood-red heart tightly and said calmly, "What's inside?" Sasa let out an astonished cry and grabbed toward his heart with one hand. However, even though a level 29 Confer Knight's body was almost indestructible, it was still a physical body. With his heart taken away, Sasa's powers were greatly reduced in an instant. He was kicked in the stomach by Fang Xingjian, and he was sent flying. With an explosive rumble, his entire body slammed into the stone wall. Stone fragments flew everywhere, and smoke and dust filled the air. However, Fang Xingjian looked at the heart that was still beating incessantly in his palm and said calmly, "From the very beginning, you've been hiding this thing. Now, you've even placed it into your heart. What is this? Did the first prince give it to you?" Sasa slowly walked out of the smoke and dust. The wound on his chest had already disappeared, displaying the terrifying vitality of a level 29 powerhouse. Fang Xingjian let go. Sasa's voice was extremely cold, and extremely brutal emotions were contained in his eyes. His face was extremely savage, and it was clear that he was extremely infuriated. That was the divine's blood, something that could increase one's potential by 10 million points. It could allow one to cultivate the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces to perfection, allowing one's body's toughness to reach the level of a level 29 superior divine weapon. It would greatly increase the chances of him attaining the divine level. Seeing that this thing was now in Fang Xingjian's hand, he felt so terrible, as if 10,000 ants were biting his heart. He had a strong urge to charge down immediately, slash off Fang Xingjian's palm, and snatch the divine's blood back. However, the abilities that Fang Xingjian had displayed earlier made him not dare to do so. If he were not careful and the divine's blood was destroyed, he would really go crazy. Therefore, he could only stare at Fang Xingjian, focusing all of his attention on him. When Fang Xingjian heard the news of the Dark Knight appearing in the governor's manor, he had suspected that this was the first prince's way of attracting attention. In Fang Xingjian's opinion, the first prince was either doing this for himself or for Sword Saint Sasa. If this level 29 expert were to join the first prince and sign the Hell's Map, he would be able to increase the first prince's powers greatly. Therefore, Fang Xingjian came over to take a look. In the process of exchanging blows with Sasa, he discovered that there was something strange about Sasa's body. There would not be such a large lump of blood clot in the body of an ordinary conferred knight. Moreover, Sasa was still continuously absorbing the power of this blood clot. Moreover, at the very end, when his powers exploded, he had even absorbed all of the blood clot into his heart. This showed that this thing was definitely something good. Seeing the change in Fang Xingjian's gaze, Sasa felt extremely anxious. However, he gradually calmed down on the surface and said coldly, "Fang Xingjian, your talent is really astonishing. To think that in just a few short months, your battle prowess is already comparable to that of a level 29 conferred knight." However, Fang Xingjian smiled. "After taking this thing, it seems that you want to kill me even more." Sasa's eyes narrowed, containing endless killing intent. However, he still controlled his emotions and said, "This is a lump of blood essence that I've condensed. It can unleash explosive powers at critical moments. It's my blood, and you won't be able to use it either." "Oh, condensing blood essence and storing energy?" Fang Xingjian knew of this killing technique, and there were indeed people who practiced it. However, looking at Sasa's performance, as well as the emotional fluctuations from his heaven's perception, Fang Xingjian could sense that this lump of blood in his hand was definitely not simple, no matter how much Sasa tried to control himself. "But why do I feel that it contains the will of a divine level expert? And that seething power, is this the blood essence of a divine-level expert? Having personally experienced the holy Orzin's will, Feng Xingjian was still very familiar with the aura of a divine-level expert. Right now, what he sensed from the heart was the will of a divine-level expert. It was also filled with a feeling of doting and affection. Just as Feng Xingjian said this, Sasa's countenance changed drastically, and he dashed toward Feng Xingjian. However, Feng Xingjian looked at Sasa and smiled. Then he suddenly swallowed the entire heart. The moment the heart entered his body, it was instantly crushed by Feng Xingjian's teeth, turning into a lump of flesh and blood that he swallowed. It entered his esophagus and then his stomach. When the divine blood entered his body, in that instant, Feng Xingjian felt as if he had swallowed a sun. An extremely majestic, ferocious, and seemingly endless power exploded in his body, gushing toward every single cell in his body. His entire face instantly flushed red. It was blood gushing upward, almost bursting his capillaries. His entire body's metabolism continued to accelerate, and accelerate. Seeing the scene of Feng Xingjian engulfing the heart's divine blood, Sword Saint Sasa let out a furious bellow, and his countenance instantly turned extremely hideous. His face contorted, and his eyes spewed out flames. He looked like an evil spirit that had charged out from hell. Feng Xingjian, I want you dead. His martial will charged into Feng Xingjian's brain with a conviction to kill. In that instant, the two of them once again got into an intense fight. Sasa's eyes were crimson red, and it was as if he had gone crazy. He performed streams of invisible sword cheese and attacked crazily at Feng Xingjian. Feng Xingjian faced the attacks with the prodigious demolition sword physique. However, as the increasingly fiery power in his stomach burst out, his battle prowess was also affected. With a long bellow, he broke out of the prison and flew out of the academy. Sasa let out a furious bellow and followed closely behind, chasing after Feng Xingjian and dashing out of the academy. The two of them cut across the sky, bringing up streams of air currents as they swept away the clouds. This instantly startled everyone in the academy. Chapter 391. Feng Xingjian. The furious bellows tore through the clouds, almost spreading throughout the entire academy. However, when everyone lifted their heads to look at the sky, they could only see two white lines cutting through the clouds, as well as two black dots that were gradually disappearing. Less than a few seconds after Sasa had disappeared in pursuit of Feng Xingjian, two silhouettes had already flown to the top of the prison. One of them looked old and clumsy, as if he would die at any moment. The other person had a muscular build and appeared to be very capable. They were the two people who had participated in the regional selection and had been judges before. They were the old Luke and the middle-aged Yaris. Both of them were level 28 experts. After the Dark Knight had arrived, they had been left behind in the regional academy to hold the fort. However, they had not expected that they had been slightly slower, and Sasa had already escaped after Feng Xingjian. Sasa has broken free. Luke, who was already very old, frowned, and the wrinkles on his face seemed to have curled up into many deep ravines. It seems that he's the first prince's target this time around. Yaris and Luke communicated through information currents. Why is Xingjian here as well? I don't know, but we can't just leave him be. If Sasa were to escape and bring Xingjian with him. Thinking of this, the two of them were in extremely bad mood. If both of them were to disappear, it would be the worst situation. Yaris, you go and give chase. I'll stay here to hold the fort in case they try to lure us away. The wrinkles on Luke's old face grew increasingly deeper. Your ability is suitable for this. You just need to chase after him and rescue Feng Xingjian. Sasa has broken free today, so there'll definitely be people coming to his aid. You must be careful as well. A few seconds later, Yaris burst into flames and soared up into the sky like a meteor. Heat waves shone through the entire academy, and the temperature within a range of several kilometers rose. In the next instant, He had already left behind streams of flames as he gave chase in the direction where Sasa had disappeared. Elsewhere, in the governor's manor, the Dark Knight was sitting on the sofa, playing chess with great interest against Governor Devitt. Suddenly, Devitt's body froze. The chess piece in his hand was crushed into powder, and he stood up abruptly. As the current headmaster of the Great Western Region Regional Academy, he had always been paying attention to the situation in the academy. Right now, someone had sent him a message through information currents, and streams of killing intent shot out from his eyes. Black Knight, you deserve to die. He took a step forward and appeared before the Dark Knight like an illusion. Slapping out with his palm, it was as if there were a myriad of dragon roars ringing out. The surrounding temperature plunged rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, the entire room was covered in frost. The Dark Knight was sent flying backward with a bang, crashing through over 10 walls before coming to a stop. As Devitt slapped out his palm, he immediately sent a voice transmission. I'll deal with him. One of you head to the academy to hold the fort, while the other goes after Sword Saint Sasa. The speed of communication between conferred knights was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he had already mixed everything that had happened in the academy into information currents and told head of department James and Hops, who was the leader of the sword arts team. The two of them were about to take action when they realized that the entire governor's manor had been surrounded by layers of black fog. Two ladies walked out slowly from the black fog. One of the ladies was dressed in palace clothes, but her thighs and arms were exposed. Simultaneously, her face was cold, and she seemed to be unapproachable. The other lady was dressed in purple clothes and had purple hair. She was Li Zi, the top-notch expert who had been pursued by the first prince on the snowy plains in the north, and who had used the 4 seals of world creation to go up against the first prince's overturned hell. Seeing the appearance of these 3 people, James frowned and said softly, Hops, stop trying. This is the ancient path of Hell's #1 killing technique for trapping people, the Hell's Cloister. Ordinary people won't be able to break through it. He then looked toward the Dark Knight, the lady in palace clothes, and Li Zi, and said, I've long sensed 2 waves of killing intent lingering in the surroundings, but I didn't expect the first prince to really place such a heavy bet. Why? Is he thinking of getting rid of the 3 of us at one go? Li Zi, who had purple hair and was dressed in purple clothes, remained silent. Her face was filled with indifference, as if the entire world had nothing to do with her. The Dark Knight let out a cold laugh, and the black aura around him grew even thicker. He was clearly doing his best to control the Hell's Cloister, trapping Devitt, James, and Hops. These 3 level 29 experts were all experts in the second tier of level 29. None of them were to be underestimated. Hearing James's words, the lady in palace clothes smiled and said, Seniors, you must be joking. Li Zi and I are only here to protect the Dark Knight. We can't possibly just watch as the 3 of you tear him apart, right? Governor Devitt shouted, Stop talking crap with them. Attack! At the next instant, intersecting forces, flames, thunderbolts, and reverse space seethed in the sky above the governor's manor. The 6 experts engaged in a great battle, and it was truly a world-shaking battle. The entire governor's manor was instantly turned into ruins. Fortunately, Devitt had sent all the good people away, so there were no casualties. However, the soaring flames, thunderbolts, and loud sounds still attracted the attention of countless people in the Great Western City. A few minutes earlier, in the Night Academy in the Great Western City, 2 assassins from the Sand Country were walking in a small alley. The lady was leading the way, while the elderly man behind her was carrying the unconscious Lilia on his back. However, when the 2 of them were halfway there, the ground under their feet had been completely covered up by shadows. The 2 of you put her down. After you break one of your arms, you can scram. Seeing that the entire ground under their feet had been covered up by black shadows that seemed to have a life of their own, spreading out and even climbing up the walls, the corners of the lady's lips curled up, revealing a hint of a smile. Shadows? You're Andre? Another genius from the Great Western region? Andre's body slowly rose up from the shadows. Looking at the two assassins from the Sand Country, he sighed inwardly. He had heard Zhou Xingwen's warning and had specially rushed over to the great western city. As he was fast enough, after taking a detour around Ferdinand's place, he then went to take a detour around Lilia's place. He had not expected that something would really happen. Looking at the two people dressed in black robes, Andre felt a strong sense of unease. The pressure coming from them was much stronger than what he had felt when he was facing many of his teachers. However, hearing their words, he still said arrogantly, "That's right. I'm the shadow of death, Andre. If you don't wish to die, then scram. It's good that it's you. Since you're a genius, then you deserve to die." The black robes on the female assassin exploded in that instant, and she punched the ground. In that instant, the shadow-covered ground turned into sand, and streams of sand arrows shot out toward Andre. All of the Empire's geniuses deserve to die. Chapter 392. With a flash, Anderson relied on the extreme speed of his shadow leap to dodge the sand arrows. He even appeared behind the old man in an instant, grabbing toward the sleeping Lilia. It was a pity that the old man's reaction was even faster. Almost at the same moment when Andre disappeared, a myriad of yellow sand gushed out from the surface of the old man's body, encompassing Lilia within it. Andre grabbed out, but other than a handful of yellow sand, he did not manage to grab anything. At the next moment, the yellow sand gushed toward him, and with a flash, Anderson disappeared once again. Within a few seconds, he had darted between the old man and the lady several tens of times. His shadow blades slashed past their bodies time and time again, but other than sending up a myriad of yellow sand, there were no other effects. On the contrary, there were a few times when Anderson came into contact with them for a brief moment. He felt the blood in his entire body seething and his skin drying up as if all the water in his body had been sucked dry. He discovered that the water vapor within a 1-meter radius of the two of them was being absorbed incessantly, turning the ground into a desert. He was unable to get close at all. Ordinary physical attacks were ineffective, and he could not even get close to them. Anderson's brows furrowed tightly. Most of the Sand Country's abilities and battle methods were related to sand. Some of their techniques were even more amazing and unfathomable than the Empire's killing techniques. This was the first time he was fighting against such an opponent, and he could not figure out what they were up to. If it was not because of the extreme speed and shadow leap ability bestowed upon him by the Shadow of Death, allowing him to jump and teleport freely among the shadows, he would have been defeated long ago. However, he did not know that he was even more fearful of Anderson's ability to teleport among the shadows. To have such an ability, Anderson's survival and infiltration abilities are too strong. If he were to continue to develop like this, how powerful would he be? Even if I can't snatch back the Heavenly Abyss Annihilation Armor, I must kill this Anderson first. Thinking of this, the killing intent in the lady from the Sand Country surged. She also truly displayed her terrifying second transition level 27 abilities, no longer caring about the various experts in the great western city. She spread out her 5 fingers, and the sand under her feet soared up into the sky, turning into a tornado. Countless grains of sand soared into the sky and then scattered down like a sandstorm. Many grains of sand scattered in the air, sweeping through the entire city at a speed of several hundred meters per second, including Anderson's body. With a flash, Andre disappeared. The woman did not mind. She spread her hands, and her whole body slowly floated up with the support of the sandstorm. The entire great western city was almost encompassed by the sand castle. She focused all her attention on controlling the sand and dust in the air, attacking Anderson continuously. The sand flew back and forth like bullets. Almost every time Andre flashed out, he would be hit by thousands of gravel. He flashed 10 times in a row and finally broke through the sandstorm, arriving outside the city. As soon as he came out, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His internal organs felt as if they were about to shatter. The female assassin from the Sand Country let out a cold laugh and commanded the sandstorm to move out of the city. However, just then, a series of explosions rang out in the sky. Two silhouettes cut across the sky, passing by the great western city and flying toward the horizon. Reading the light waves left behind by the figure passing through the sky in that short instant, the female assassin from the sand country frowned. Fang Xingjian, the old man next to her shouted, "Sir, it's Fang Xingjian. Someone is chasing after him. Let's head over quickly." Just then, another fiery meteor flashed past. It was Yari's, who had been in pursuit of Sasa. The female assassin was stunned for a moment. She wanted to kill Anderson first, but she realized that while she was stunned, Anderson had once again teleported away despite his serious injuries. Damn it! The fury in her turned into killing intent, and the female assassin let out a furious bellow. She swept up the sand and dust in the air, turning into a sand dragon that cut across the horizon and gave chase in the direction in which Fang Xingjian had disappeared. Elsewhere, in the alley behind the restaurant, Diana walked out from the restaurant's back door and headed for the house near her. With two level 19 guards following beside her, she felt a little uneasy. She smiled and said, "The two of you, there's no need for you to follow me so closely. I can go back on my own. It's very close." The two knights shook their heads and said, "Miss Diana, Mr. Zhou wants us to protect you the entire time. It's better for us to send you back." Diana smiled helplessly and did not insist. Instead, she asked, "How are the dishes today?" The knight smiled and said, "Miss Diana, your culinary skills are getting better and better. Right now, all the aristocrats in the great western city are talking about your restaurant. It probably won't be long before it becomes popular throughout the entire great western city." Popular? I don't really care if it becomes popular or not. As long as more people are able to eat the dishes I cook and like them, it'll be fine, Diana said with a smile. Just then, a cold and gloomy voice rang out from the alley at the side. "What an interesting idea. Miss Diana, can I hire you to be my full-time chef?" "Who is it?" The two knights instantly stood in front of Diana, one on the left and one on the right. They looked warily at the feminine-looking young man who was slowly walking out from the shadows. The young man smiled and ignored the two knights. His eyes were fixed on Diana as he asked, "How is it? Miss Diana, are you willing?" Diana frowned and said, "I'm sorry. I'm doing quite well right now and don't wish to change. I appreciate your kind intentions." The feminine-looking young man sighed, shook his head, and said, "It's a pity, to think that you don't know how to cherish the great riches and honor that have fallen from the sky. You're really foolish. Lad, where did you come from? Do you know who you're talking to?" The feminine-looking young man threw a glance at the knight who had spoken. Then, with a sudden dash, his entire palm sunk into the knight's body. The knight's body instantly aged and weakened, and within a few seconds, he had turned into a mummified corpse. The knight let out an enraged bellow and pounced forward like a tiger. His claws brought along a strong gust of wind, as if he wanted to tear the feminine-looking young man into countless pieces. However, the feminine-looking young man's other hand reached out at lightning speed and grabbed his neck. His limbs also started to turn weak, and his skin started to wrinkle. He started to age rapidly at a speed that could be seen by the naked eye. Casually tossing aside the two knights who had turned into old men, a hint of excitement flashed on the feminine-looking young man's face. He turned to look at Diana, and the latter revealed a terrified expression. A level 19 knight was already in existence that completely surpassed that of ordinary humans. Any one of them would be able to kill hundreds or even thousands of ordinary humans. However, they had been easily dealt with by the feminine-looking young man. Diana immediately turned to flee. She opened her mouth, wanting to shout out when she felt a small, fair hand pressing down on her mouth. She was then unable to unleash any strength in her body. The feminine-looking young man smiled. The Dark Knight single-handedly held back those three old men. The heavens are really on my side. Now, that Fang Xingjian should be coming out, right? Chapter 393. Diana sensed that there was an invisible force binding her body, causing her to be unable to even move a single finger. She could only glare with her eyes wide open in fury. Looking at Diana's enraged expression, the feminine-looking young man smiled and said, "After you return with me, you'll know how foolish your anger today is. You'll be grateful to me for bringing you to heaven for the rest of your life." As he spoke, he lifted Diana's neck with one hand and let go of her mouth. Diana did not shout out again. She knew that the other party had been able to kill 2 knights instantly, and now that he was so close to her, he was not someone she could go up against. She merely glared fiercely at the feminine-looking young man and said, "This is the great western city. You won't be able to leave this place." He, the great western city. He, the strongest expert in this city, can't even fend for himself. As they spoke, flames soared into the sky from the direction of the governor's manor, illuminating most of the sky in red. Diana looked at the boundless red light in astonishment, and the feminine-looking young man laughed. "Feng Xingjian has really offended quite a lot of people, but this has saved me a lot of trouble." Diana said furiously, "What on earth are you trying to do?" "What am I trying to do? You'll know in a while." Just then, 2 white lines swept past in the sky, and the majestic air currents collided. It sounded like a myriad of thunderclaps exploding, causing one's heart to tremble in fear. The feminine-looking young man looked in the direction of the sky in astonishment. At the next moment, he discovered that sand and dust were stirred up, and the boundless yellow sand soared into the sky, turning into a sand dragon that chased after the white lines. "Young master." An old steward darted out from behind the feminine-looking young man, looked at the boundless yellow sand, and said, "The people from the sand country, and that person from earlier." A hint of excitement flashed in the feminine-looking young man's eyes. "Feng Xingjian. To think that there's someone who has the same thoughts as us and has really managed to force him out." "Young master, then what should we do?" "Chase after him. Don't let Feng Xingjian be snatched away by someone else." With that, the feminine-looking young man knocked Diana out with a palm strike. Looking at the blonde beauty who had fainted, he smiled and said, "I'll take you away after I capture that Feng Xingjian." At the next moment, the feminine-looking young man and the old butler took a step forward, and the entire long street was torn into 2 by violent powers. Under the eruption of pure power, 2 long afterimages were formed, and the 2 of them charged out at the wildest and most ferocious speed. In the sky, Feng Xingjian's feet continued to stomp on the air, creating streams of air currents. The temperature of his entire body continued to rise, and he even emitted hints of white steam. However, they were quickly blown away by the strong gales. After swallowing the divine blood, as the essence of the divine blood continued to disperse into all of his organs, limbs, and bones, Feng Xingjian felt as if his body had erupted like a volcano. Even his limbs were not listening to him. A terrifying will rose time and time again from his blood, as if wanting to dominate his body and control every single cell in his body. Feng Xingjian could sense that every single cell in his body was trembling. It was as if his body would be modified at any moment under the influence of that terrifying will, turning him into a completely different kind of life form. After all, this was the blood essence of a divine-level ferocious beast. Consuming it for his descendants could speed up their growth, modify their physical bodies, and allow them to progress in the direction of becoming a divine-level ferocious beast. It was also because this blood essence was meant for their descendants and did not possess any offensive properties that Sasa and Feng Xingjian could consume it. Otherwise, they would probably be killed by the divine-level power on the spot. However, even though the god's blood was considered to be mild, even though Sasa was a level 29, 3rd-tier conferred knight, he only dared to absorb the power bit by bit, slowly wearing down the will within it. Right now, Feng Xingjian had swallowed the entire essence of the god's blood and could only try his best to suppress the terrifying will flowing in his blood. However, he discovered that the pressure from the other party was getting increasingly stronger. He had no choice but to divert more of his energy to suppress the rampaging power in his body, causing his battle prowess to plunge rapidly. Simultaneously, he thought, passing through the great western city. Those who wanted to make a move must have already done so, right? It turned out that Sword Saint Sasa was only the first person Fang Xingjian suspected. Now that the Dark Knight had attracted the attention of many experts, the powers who had wanted to make a move against him but did not dare to do so would naturally become restless. Fang Xingjian had taken this into consideration. This time around, after coming out from his seclusion, his abilities had increased tremendously. Not only could he test out his sword technique, but he could also give the other party a great surprise. Therefore, this time around, he had crossed the great western city in pursuit of Sasa. He wanted to lure out these restless people in one go and then get rid of all of them. It was impossible for the other party to have expected that after possessing the 5th level of the Mystical Prince and having the world's top sword arts talent, Fang Xingjian's abilities had improved by leaps and bounds to an unimaginable level. It's about time. I'll give you guys another chance. Let's see if you guys can grab hold of it tightly. If there's really no other way, I'll just use the Heaven's Volition Sword intent to suppress the will in the divine blood. With the reinforcement from the Heaven's Volition Sword intent, he could directly use the power of level 29. With his current foundation, if he were to use the Heaven's Volition Sword intent, it would be extremely powerful and would be able to suppress the divine blood in his body. Thinking of this, his body, which was flying in the air, drew out an arc and plunged toward the ground. Both he and Sasa were great experts amongst Confer Knights. Both of them were pursuing Fang Xingjian at over 10 times that of supersonic speed. In just a short period of time, they were already over 100 kilometers away from the great western city. Under Fang Xingjian's feet was a stretch of grass plains. He plunged down from the sky like a meteor, charging forward at an intense speed. With each step he took, a crater with a width of over 10 meters would be created. With a few consecutive steps, the grass plains within a range of over 100 meters would be turned into a mud pit before he came to a stop. The moment he came to a stop, he sat down cross-legged on the ground, using all his might to suppress the increasingly violent power in his blood. Of course, it was impossible for him to not put up any defenses. 6 light spots slowly appeared behind him, surrounding him in 6 directions in the blink of an eye. Not long after Fang Xingjian came to a stop, whistling sounds rang out. Sword Saint Sasa had already chased after Fang Xingjian from the sky, charging toward him. Over 500 streams of aura soared into the sky from all over his body. Sasa's face was filled with savagery, and his violent killing intent seemed to have materialized. Fang Xingjian, go and die. As Sasa dashed out at full force, he tapped out with his finger, and over 100 streams of invisible sword cheese turned into many spirals that swirled together, piercing out fiercely toward Fang Xingjian's head. Although Sasa was infuriated, he had not lost his rationality. Right now, he wanted to kill Fang Xingjian and then absorb all of his blood. Only then would he be able to make up for what he had lost in terms of the divine's blood. If there was a need, he was even planning to eat up all of Fang Xingjian's flesh. Therefore, he only planned to destroy Fang Xingjian's brain. As Sasa dashed down from the sky, his body created streams of sparks from the friction. Before he even got close, the shock waves he brought along with him struck the ground, creating a few layers of cracks in the ground near Fang Xingjian. At the next moment, Sasa's sword fingers had already arrived before Fang Xingjian. Then, with a loud rumble, his sword fingers collided with over 50 streams of ether sword ripples. When the sword ripples and sword fingers collided, the entire sky seemed to fall silent. Sasa's body, which was moving at extreme speed, paused for a moment in midair. Then there was a world-shaking explosion. Seething power exploded from the point where the sword ripples and sword fingers collided. Smoke and dust soared into the sky, and the entire ground was torn open. Other than the area under Fang Xingjian's feet, the ground and the surroundings had been torn open to a depth of over 1 meter. Sasa was also sent flying for a distance of several kilometers. Wherever he passed by, the grass would be overturned, and sand would surge, creating a long passageway in the plains under his feet. However, after being sent flying by Feng Xingjian, the killing intent in Sasa's heart grew even stronger. With a long whistle, he blew away all the smoke and dust in the air and once again dashed out toward Feng Xingjian. Chapter 394. Streams of black lines continued to circle around Feng Xingjian's body. Each time the black lines got close, the light spots around Feng Xingjian would release a myriad of light beams. That was the defensive form of the Zenith Light Sword formation. No matter what kind of attack Feng Xingjian faced, the six of them would shoot out streams of light swords, slashing, piercing, or sweeping. They would vaporize all matter that got close to Feng Xingjian. They were like six light shields protecting Feng Xingjian. If Sasa were to charge over personally, he would be able to sense ripples flashing in the air. It was the ether sword ripples that sent Sasa flying once again. Sasa's expression was savage and filled with killing intent. His movements were so fast that it was as if he had turned into streams of black lines, tearing through the air as he circled around Feng Xingjian, who was sitting cross-legged, and attacked. It was either the gushing invisible sword cheese or the berserk sword arts, which directly collided with one's body. Under the full power of a level 29 conferred knight, this series of quick attacks was world-shaking. Each collision, each explosive physical pressure, and fierce attack would cause the earth to tremble and sand and rocks to fly. The repercussions of the collisions radiated out in all directions time and time again. Other than Feng Xingjian and the small piece of soil he was on floating in the air, the entire ground had been smashed into a great canyon by Sasa. With another tap of his finger, the sword cheese collided fiercely with the 10 streams of ether sword ripples amidst the whistling sounds. The surging forces compressed the air, and the forces from their collisions exploded in midair. It was as if several 10,000 kilograms of explosives had exploded. Countless rocks and soil were blasted into the air, once again widening and deepening the canyon under Feng Xingjian. Damn it! Sasa came to an abrupt stop, and all the muscles and bones in his body started to seethe as if they were cooked. He took in a light breath, and the countless ether particles in the world had already completed the energy exchange with his body. All sorts of radiations, light waves, electromagnetic waves, and other energies in the air gushed into his body, causing his energy level to rise rapidly. However, as Sasa looked at Feng Xingjian, who was sitting on the floating piece of soil, the killing intent in his eyes grew increasingly violent. Feng Xingjian's entire body was red. His muscles and tendons bulged out from time to time, then were suppressed again. Layers of white mist kept rising from the surface of the man's body. Sasa knew that the man's body was operating at a high speed. Every cell was probably moving and releasing heat. He is trying his best to suppress the will of the god's blood. Once he succeeds, he will be able to absorb the essence of the god's blood. How dare you do such a thing in front of me? Recalling Feng Xingjian's defensive methods, he laughed coldly in his heart. I don't believe you can block it forever. No matter what, I also have an ether organ that I obtained at level 28. How can I lose to you in terms of energy? Sasa's judgment was not wrong. Putting aside the Zenith Light Sword formation and just the ether sword ripples alone, even with the rapid increase in Feng Xingjian's abilities, he would only be able to release 5,000 streams of ether sword ripples. Once Sasa depleted all of them, the Zenith Light Sword formation alone would definitely not be able to fend him off. Sasa gritted his teeth, put his palms together, and streams of invisible sword cheese extended out from his body. In the blink of an eye, they turned into a long sword that soared up into the sky and continued to grow. Then let's see if you'll be able to suppress the god's blood first, or if I'll crush you into minced meat. Just as Sasa was about to attack at full power once again, a fiery meteor cut across the sky. It was Yari's, who had chased after him from the regional academy. Flames burst out from his entire body, and he stopped moving after flying up into the sky above Sasa. Sasa, you've destroyed the academy and chased after students. Do you really want to go up against the entire Great Western region? If you stop now, I can let you off since it hasn't been easy for you to cultivate. Sasa laughed out loud, looked at Yaris, and said, Yaris, you're thinking of stalling for time with just a few words? If Devitt were to come personally, I'd leave immediately. As for you, you're not enough. With that, the invisible sword cheese all over his body turned into a 100-meter-long, transparent longsword, slashing out fiercely toward Fang Xinjian with an overwhelming aura. Stop! Yaris' martial will attacked, and it was as if two suns had risen above his hands. They descended simultaneously from the sky, bringing along a boundless golden light and exploding toward Sasa. Damn it! Sasa's brows furrowed, and he had no choice but to raise his sword cheese, colliding with a huge fireball. The fireball exploded, and the sword cheese slashed onto Yaris' body without stopping. However, the moment the two came into contact, Yaris had already turned into a seething fireball, exploding under the slashes and turning into a myriad of sparks. This was his fire clone. His real body had long since hidden in the sky. The omnipresent flames burned and moved in all directions in the sky, and Yaris' martial will came charging down. Sasa, give up. With me around, you can forget about harming Fang Xinjian. Sasa activated his heaven's perception at full power, incessantly scanning for Yaris' silhouette through light and sound waves. However, the sparks soared into the sky, turning into a fire cloud that encompassed the sky within a range of several kilometers. Under the interference of such heat and light rays, Sasa was unable to find Yaris' silhouette within a short period of time. This was the killing technique that Yaris was famous for, blazing flame howl. If it were any other time, Sasa would have been able to defeat Yaris if he had spent a little more time slashing through the sea of flames. After all, Yaris was only at level 28 and was weaker than him. However, right now, Fang Xinjian was suppressing the essence of the divine blood in his body, and Sasa was racing against time to snatch back the divine blood. How could he allow himself to waste time on Yaris? However, if he did not get rid of Yaris, Yaris would definitely stop him from attacking Fang Xinjian. At the thought of this, the killing intent in Sasa's chest seethed increasingly, as if it was going to materialize and break out from his body. Damn it, damn it, damn it. All of you are coming to stop me. All of you deserve to die. Thinking of how Fang Xinjian was suppressing the divine blood incessantly, Sasa became increasingly anxious. The aura of the specialty seeds on his body swelled up once again, and it was as if there were streams of starlight flashing on his body. Detonating his specialty seeds would mean that there would be an eternal flaw in his physical body cultivation, and he would never be able to reach perfection. Sasa was prepared to go all out. However, just as he was about to detonate his specialty seeds, a stretch of yellow sand came flying toward him at an extremely fast speed. It was as if many bullets were charging toward him. When he first saw the sand, it was still far away in the horizon. However, at the next second, it was already several hundred meters away from him. At the next second, it was right before his eyes, stopping when it saw the fire clouds filling up the sky. Sasa had been fighting against the Sand Country's experts in the Eastern Sand region for many years and was very familiar with the Sand Country's various killing techniques. At the sight of this scene, he knew that it must be a second transition expert from the Sand Country. The path that the Sand Country's warriors took was similar to that of the Empire's knights. It was just that their killing techniques were more proficient in modifying their bodies and making use of sand to attack. Seeing the sky full of yellow sand, Sasa decided to take a gamble. He released information currents and sent his marshal while dashing toward the sky full of yellow sand. He bellowed furiously through the information currents. Fang Xinjian is in the midst of clearing the heavenly barrier and attaining a breakthrough to level 27. Let's attack him together. He has sufficient experience, so we mustn't let him attain a breakthrough to level 27. Otherwise, even I won't be able to deal with him. You guys can forget about killing him. If we capture him together, I can give you guys the Heavenly Abyss Annihilation Armor. Chapter 395. As someone who had been in contact with the Sand Country for a long time, Sasa was very clear about their motives and way of doing things. In the Sand Country, the title of national hero was a very high and glorious one. For their remains to be unable to enter their divine temple after their death was the greatest stain in their lives. Therefore, Sasa knew that the other party must have come to snatch Fang Xingjian's Heavenly Abyss Annihilation Armor, which was also Damarov's remains. The priority of such a grudge was even above his own. After all, he had killed countless geniuses and warriors from the Sand Country. Amidst the sandstorm, the female assassin stared at Fang Xingjian, who was seated cross-legged. Thoughts ran through her mind as she continued to communicate with the old assassin through information currents at high speed. Can Sasa's words be trusted? Sword Saint Sasa had been in the Eastern Sand region for a long time, fighting against the Sand Country at the borders. His hands were stained with the blood of countless Sand Country's warriors, and the Sand Country hated him to the core. The female assassin was instinctively unwilling to listen to Sasa's words. However, looking at the fierce-looking fire cloud and Fang Xingjian, who was seated cross-legged, she felt that Sasa did not seem to be lying to her. The old assassin, who was also in a daze amidst the sandstorm, said, "That fire cloud should have been transformed by Yaris, a level 28 conferred knight. It seems that he is really protecting Fang Xingjian." Moreover, there have been rumors that Fang Xingjian and Sasa have a great feud because of the analysis of ancient relics. Moreover, by the looks of Fang Xingjian, it seems that he has reached a critical point in his cultivation, which is about to allow him to break through. Then, are we going to do it? Let's join forces for now. We'll find an opportunity and let both of them suffer great injuries. Haha! If we can kill 3 Empire's conferred knights in one go and bring this back, His Majesty will definitely reward us handsomely. A soft bellow rang out from the sandstorm, and the voice swept out toward the sky. Sasa, join us to deal with Yaris first. After dealing with Yaris, we'll surround and attack Fang Xingjian. To prove our sincerity, you can make the first move. Sasa gritted his teeth. That idiot. Although he wanted to attack Fang Xingjian, he also knew that if he were to attack now, he would definitely be stopped by Yaris. Moreover, it would be even more difficult for the Sand Country's assassin to completely trust him. If he were to become Yari's enemy because he did not agree to the other party's request, it would be even more troublesome. The Sand Country had a bounty on his head all year round. In terms of personal value, they should be more eager to kill Sasa, if not for the Heavenly Abyss Annihilation Armor. It could be said that the relationship between the 3 parties was tense, and no one could trust each other. As a result, Sasa could only curse and charge up into the sky with his sword chi. The invisible sword chi tore through the sky, and he charged into the sea of flames. All right, Sasa, then we'll also lend you a hand and kill Yaris. In the next moment, the yellow sand that filled the sky began to tremble violently, pouncing toward the fire cloud controlled by Yaris. The sand and flames in the sky clashed fiercely against each other. The flames kept on being engulfed by the sand, and the sand kept on being vaporized by the flames. The 2 parties seemed to be locked in a stalemate, each taking up a large part of the sky. Simultaneously, streams of invisible sword chis kept on sweeping to and fro in the flames, searching for Yari's real body. It was impossible for conferred knights to really turn their bodies into flames. They could only control flames or use their bodies to store them. Moreover, as Sasa controlled the sword chis to sweep through the sea of flames, cutting off the transmission of heat and the coordination between the flames, the sandstorm controlled by the 2 Sand Country assassins gradually gained the upper hand. Streams of yellow sand soared into the sky, dashing toward the sea of flames like many flood dragons. Each time they dashed forward, they would extinguish the flames, gradually encompassing the entire sea of flames like a huge net, and then compressing it. The sea of flames dashed left and right, but each attack was cut off by Sasa's sword chis. Yari sensed that the area in which his real body could move was getting increasingly smaller, and the range of the Sea of Flames was also being suppressed. He bellowed furiously, "Sasa, are you crazy? To think that you would contact the Sand Country's assassins to besiege the Empire's conferred knights? This is treason." Sasa let out a long laugh and said, "Ha ha! Yaris, I might as well just kill you here today. Who would be able to find out about this? You've locked me up underground for so long. Do you know that feeling? That feeling of darkness, loneliness, and despair. Do you really think that you can lock me up forever?" Amidst his maniacal laughter, a myriad of invisible sword cheese slashed out in all directions. Violent powers clashed against the air, forming strong gales that were like sharp blades, instantly extinguishing a large area of the Sea of Flames. Yari's heart sank. 3 conferred knights, and one of them was a level 29 expert. With the 3 of them joining forces to attack him, it was just a matter of time before he was defeated. Just as Yari's was gradually falling into a disadvantageous position, another 2 silhouettes darted over from the ground. With each step the 2 of them took, the ground would tremble and explode, and strong gales would blow in all directions. They seemed to have no intention of hiding their tracks. They were like 2 Tyrannosaurus Rex, charging straight into the battlefield, leaving behind a trail of debris. They were the feminine-looking man from the Serene shrine and his butler. The arrival of the 2 of them instantly destroyed the original occupation. The sand and dust retreated, and Sword Saint Sasa also landed on the ground. All of them looked at the 2 of them warily. Yaris was finally able to catch his breath and make good use of this time to rest. This was why there was no trust between the Sand Country's assassins and Sword Saint Sasa. Once a newcomer appeared during the battle, they would be worried that it was the other party's backup plan and would not be able to continue attacking Yaris. Looking at the few experts present, the feminine-looking young man laughed out loud. "The Terrene Shrine has arrived. Those who don't wish to die, scram." Hearing the Terrene Shrine's name, everyone present was taken aback. It was as if they had not expected that this influence would suddenly appear. Sword Saint Sasa let out a cold laugh and said, "To think that a street rat that everyone wants to beat up dares to come out and be arrogant now." The feminine-looking young man raised his brows and looked at Sword Saint Sasa. His eyes were filled with a sense of superiority. "I was wondering who it was. The Eastern Sand Region's Sword Saint? To think that you dare to call yourself a saint after knowing a few superficial sword arts?" With that, the feminine-looking young man raised his palms, and streams of gray light burst out from his body. At the next moment, a myriad of beastly roars rang out incessantly, and the feminine-looking young man's body started to swell up incessantly. Many beastly faces popped out from his chest, shoulders, neck, cheeks, and other parts of his body. It was as if there were countless terrifying creatures fighting to come out from his body. Level 7 black magic, myriad dragons galloping. Chapter 396. Dragons had always been a special type of living creature in the world. Throughout history and in countless worlds, dragons of various forms had always been either revered or feared by humans. The power of a dragon, the majesty of a dragon, the greed of a dragon, the purity of a dragon, the evilness of a dragon, etc. Right now, many different types of dragons kept on appearing from the surface of the feminine-looking young man's body. Level 7 black magic, myriad dragons galloping, used one's own body as a gateway to another world, summoning and enslaving the powers of the various dragons in the other world for battle. The powers of the dragons were channeled into his body and then used to grow from his flesh and blood. In that instant, huge dragons that blotted out the sky darted out from the feminine-looking young man's body. There were white dragons, blue dragons, gray dragons, black dragons, red dragons, and all sorts of huge dragons with wings. There were also huge dragons with antlers, snake bodies, fish scales, and eagle claws. A myriad of dragon roars rang out simultaneously, and the powers of wind, fire, thunder, and lightning shook the sky. Violent energy gushed out, sweeping through a large part of the sky and breaking a large part of the cloud layers in the sky. Ha ha ha! After releasing 356 huge dragons in one go, the feminine-looking young man's body seemed to have shrunk by one size, and he appeared even paler and weaker. Looking at the several hundred huge dragons in the sky, Sword Saint Sassa's countenance turned extremely grim. Were these things? When did the Serene Shrine have such terrifying abilities? He could sense that almost half of the several hundred monsters in the sky were at the second transition level. Among them, there was a three-headed dragon, a crystal dragon, and a huge golden dragon. All of them had powers close to his. This was extremely terrifying. The two assassins from the Sand Country were also secretly astonished. The sandstorm that they had turned into started to retreat slowly. The army of monsters before them was far too astonishing. They even saw a dragon that was as big as a mountain, and the ground started to sink incessantly just by sitting on the ground. There was also a dragon beast flying in the sky, occasionally dripping a drop of saliva. When the saliva landed on the ground, it vaporized a large piece of rock. The old assassin said, "Damn it, what on earth are these things? Are they the Empire's latest inventions? This killing technique is too terrifying." The female assassin from the Sand Country frowned as she looked at the army of monsters before her. It was a ghastly sight. If the Empire had really invented this new and terrifying killing technique, then as long as there were 100 Confer Knights who had cultivated this killing technique, the Sand Country's army would not be able to fend them off. However, when she recalled what the feminine-looking young man had said earlier, she raised her brows and said, "That's not right. Serene Shrine. Serene Shrine. I remember now. This is an evil cult that the Empire wiped out over 20 years ago. Is it their magic? It can actually reach such a level." Within the fiery clouds in the sky, Yaris was also paying attention to the effeminate-looking young man and the army of dragon beasts that had suddenly appeared. He was overwhelmed with shock. To think that these surviving members of the Serene Shrine have made such great progress in black magic. We must report this immediately to the Knight Association and have them launch a new round of encirclement and suppression against the Serene Shrine. Thinking of the Serene Shrine's base in the Great Western region and the black magic displayed by the feminine-looking young man, Yaris felt an extreme sense of danger. The feminine-looking young man glanced disdainfully at the few people who were on high alert. He pointed at Fang Xingjian and said, "Bring him here." Boom! A huge red dragon swung its tail and lashed out at the air, releasing explosive popping sounds. Then its entire body smashed toward Fang Xingjian like a building. Many huge, rock-like muscles popped out on the red dragon's body, and there were many exquisite carvings on each of its dragon scales. It was as if it was an armor that had been thoroughly tempered. The moment the red dragon moved, the Zenith Light Sword formation was activated as well. 6 light swords swept out, and high-energy rays of several 10,000 degrees Celsius struck the huge dragon scales. However, they only left behind many char marks and burns. Other than causing the red dragon to bellow furiously, they did not manage to stop the huge dragon's attack at all. However, the Zenith Light Sword formation went through another series of changes. A series of dazzling light beams flashed in the air, and the 6 light swords all shot into the red dragon's eyes. The continuous transmission of several 10,000 degrees Celsius high temperatures caused the red dragon's eyeballs to instantly boil and evaporate within 1,000th of a second. Agonizing cries rang out from the huge dragon's mouth, and its body, which was over 100 meters long, crashed onto the ground and rolled around crazily. The agonizing cries caused the ground to tremble continuously, and sand and rocks were sent flying. It was as if a small-scale earthquake had occurred. The feminine-looking young man snorted coldly. Once again, 3 dragon beasts surrounded him. The rest of the dragon beasts stayed at the side, guarding against the others. Especially the 3 strongest dragons, the golden dragon and the crystal dragon. All of them stood by his side, protecting him. Yaris let out a furious bellow. Stop! He had already controlled the waves of fire rain, turning them into fiery meteors that struck out toward the feminine-looking young man. Sword Saint Sasa and the two Sand Country assassins wanted Fang Xinjian's blood, while the other wanted Fang Xinjian's Heavenly Abyss annihilation armor. Naturally, they would not be willing to see Fang Xinjian get captured so easily. Seeing that the army of Dragon Beasts was moving again, they also made their moves. Sword Saint Sasa's martial will burst out from his body. Fang Xinjian is mine. A stream of invisible sword chi that was over 100 meters long darted out from Sword Saint Sasa's body, slashing out toward the three dragons who were attacking Fang Xinjian. The two Sand Country assassins also made their moves. It could be said that out of the four influences, they were the weakest. Therefore, the moment they made their move, sand and dust came gushing forth, engulfing the many huge dragons. Seeing that he was being surrounded and attacked by the three of them, the feminine-looking young man smiled nonchalantly. The reason why I didn't dare to make a move in the Great Western City was because Devitt and the other two old men were around. If I were to encounter the three of them, I would naturally not be a match for them. But now, even a bunch of useless people like you dare to fight against me? You guys don't understand how great a god is. It's a power that far surpasses the limits of your imagination. Even if you were to stack up all the living creatures that you've seen in your lifetime, they would still not be comparable to a single thought from a god. The feminine-looking young man let out a maniacal laugh and pointed out, "Kill them all." In the blink of an eye, the army of dragons was already engaged in a chaotic battle with Yaris, Sword Saint Sasa, and the two Sand Country assassins. Other than the three strongest dragons that were guarding the young man, these dragons' average abilities were not comparable to Yaris, Sasa, and the Sand Country assassins. However, dragons were born to be more suited for battle than humans. They had a weight of several tens or hundreds of tons, a length of over 100 meters, or even several hundred meters. They were impervious to weapons, water, and fire. They had scales that were like titanium alloys, and their physical strength was comparable to that of tanks, bulldozers, and cranes. Even though their levels were lower than the few of them, the battle prowess that they could unleash was something that even Sasa would have to deal with carefully. Just like that, the feminine-looking young man managed to suppress 4 second transition experts single-handedly. The several hundred dragons kept the 4 of them at the periphery, unable to get close to the feminine-looking young man at all. The feminine-looking young man let out a cold laugh. He looked at where Fang Xinjian was and took a step forward. A golden dragon carried his body, and under the protection of the crystal dragon and the three-headed dragon, he slowly flew toward Fang Xinjian. Chapter 397. Seeing that the feminine-looking young man was walking toward Fang Xinjian, Sword Saint Sasa was both angry and anxious. However, although the several tens of dragons before him were unable to hurt him, they could be said to have thick skin and flesh. Usually, with a single invisible slash from him, he would be able to slash through steel plates that were several meters thick. However, right now, even if he were to slash out with his 100-meter-long sword cheese, he would only be able to slash out a bloody mess. At most, he would be able to slash through scales and muscles, but he would not be able to hurt the dragons' bodies. This was especially so when the bodies of the dragons were extremely huge and filled with vital energy and blood. They would not care about ordinary injuries at all. The feminine-looking young man had already arrived 10 meters away from Fang Xinjian. 3 of the strongest dragons were guarding the young man. If he were to take another step forward, he would fall into Fang Xinjian's defensive range. Right now, Fang Xinjian had also reached the most critical juncture. The essence of the divine blood in his body had already flowed throughout his entire body, including his limbs and bones. Waves of violence will continue to affect each and every one of his cells, but he was able to suppress them with his extremely strong will. Even under such circumstances, he was still sensing the situation in the surrounding battlefield. When he saw that the few parties were engaged in a chaotic battle, He was more than happy to see it happen. However, he had not expected that the feminine-looking young man from the Serene shrine would be able to suppress everyone single-handedly and head toward him. However, right now, it was not the time for him to reel in the net. Thinking of this, he sighed inwardly. In the end, he still had to use the Heaven's Volition sword intent. Even he felt the pinch from using up 100,000 potential points per second. It would be best if he could wait until he had completely suppressed the divine blood and the few of them were seriously injured. However, it was impossible for things to develop in the best direction. As he thought of this, he opened his eyes and stood up. Seeing how Feng Xingjian had stood up, the feminine-looking young man's brows twitched, and he said in surprise, "Oh, it seems that you're still thinking of resisting in this state?" He smiled and said, "Can't you see the situation in the surroundings?" Yaris controlled a large patch of fire clouds to envelop over 100 giant dragons. However, although these giant dragons continued to scream and roar in pain, they were still full of energy and did not show any signs of weakness. In particular, more than 20 of the giant dragons kept spewing out streams of cold air to offset the flames. They actually managed to withstand Yaris' attacks for the time being. Although they were at a disadvantage, they did not show any signs of being defeated. This made Yaris anxious, but there was nothing he could do. After all, there were several tens of second transition dragons among them. It was equivalent to several tens of second transition knights, whose physical bodies had been strengthened by 10 times or more, attacking him together. For Yaris to be able to remain undefeated and even gain the upper hand, it was already a testament to his great abilities. Seeing that Feng Xingjian had stood up, he immediately sent a message to Feng Xingjian. "Run. This guy's black magic is too powerful. We're not a match for him." Seeing that Feng Xingjian was not moving at all, he was anxious and angry. He knew that Feng Xingjian's speed was extremely fast, and he might really be able to escape. Therefore, he sent another message to Feng Xingjian. "Xingjian, don't go head-on against him here. He should be an unrivaled genius that the Serene Shrine has nurtured over the past 10 years or so. You should escape back to the Great Western City first and look for the governor and the others. If you stay here, I won't be able to leave either. You'll only be a burden." However, Feng Xingjian still did not move. He merely looked at the feminine-looking young man with an indifferent expression and said, "You're someone from the Serene Shrine?" The corners of the feminine-looking young man's lips curled up. "You seem to be very indignant. Do you think that the branch that you've wiped out is the Serene Shrine's strongest power?" As he spoke, the feminine-looking young man smiled once again. "I know that you're very indignant. You feel that you're very talented, that you're extremely outstanding, that you have talent that surpasses others. From the time you were an apprentice to where you are today, you probably haven't met any opponents, right? I understand this feeling. This is what it feels like to be a genius. However, there's a difference between geniuses as well. When you were still walking on the path of a knight, my sights were already set beyond the heavens. The difference between our horizons and our gazes is like that of clouds and mud." At the end, the feminine-looking young man could no longer hold it in and laughed out loud. Compared to the brutal competition within the Serene Shrine, he still preferred to face those geniuses who were knights in the Empire. Each time he trampled on these so-called geniuses, and geniuses, he would see the powers that the other party was so proud of being crushed by him without a care in the world. He would see them trembling in despair. The feminine-looking young man would always feel a strange sense of exhilaration. Feng Xingjian did not say a word. He merely put out his right hand, and streams of fog that were like brilliant galaxies slowly encompassed his arm. The prodigious demolition sword physique had been activated. The feminine-looking young man smiled, as if he was watching a baby resisting him. He looked at the 3 huge dragons before him, feeling extremely confident. He had paid an immeasurable price in order to integrate these 3 huge dragons into his body. Only then could he activate the black magic, myriad dragons galloping, to summon them. The crystal dragon's body was formed from a special material. Its entire body was snow white, but it was extremely tough. Even a level 29 conferred knight would need to spend over 10 minutes to slash through its body by attacking physical particles directly. It had once received over 50 attacks from level 6 black magic consecutively and remained unscathed. It had even helped the Terrene Shrine dig through a huge mountain within half a month to build their base. It possessed terrifying strength and stamina, and it was its strongest defense. The three-headed dragon was even more amazing. Its three heads could respectively release poison, fog, and lightning. The poison in it could turn a level 25 conferred knight who had the ability to regenerate into a pool of blood. The fog, on the other hand, had powerful hallucinogenic abilities. It had once easily hypnotized several thousand people in a town and brought them all back to the Terrene Shrine's base. The middle head of the three-headed dragon could also release something similar to ball-shaped lightning. Although it could only release this amount every day, it had once blasted a small city into the sky, turning it into dust. The golden dragon under his feet was even more amazing. It could turn invisible, and it could also enlarge and shrink. When it was big, it could use its physical strength to sweep up a huge mountain. When it was small, it could drill into a person's brain. In the past, this golden dragon had single-handedly killed several tens of second-transition ferocious beasts. In order to subdue it, the feminine-looking young man had sacrificed over 100 dragon beasts. The army of dragon beasts in his body was the feminine-looking young man's greatest reliance. Both he and the Terrene Shrine had paid a huge price to strengthen him, allowing him to become who he was today. Looking at Feng Xingjian's laughable actions, the feminine-looking young man smiled and waved his hand. Only the strong have the right to speak. And right now, I'm the strongest person here. Therefore, what I say is the truth. Capture him. At the next moment, other than the golden dragon who was carrying the feminine-looking young man, the other strongest crystal dragon and the three-headed dragon each extended a dragon claw, slapping out toward Feng Xingjian from both sides. Chapter 398. The crystal dragon and the three-headed dragon lived up to their reputation as the best amongst the many dragons present. Both of them had a length of over 300 meters, and their tall and strong bodies were like small hills. The scales all over their bodies were like the armor plates of aircraft carriers, displaying endless power. This was the advantage of dragons. Even though they did not have as many realms as humans, their bodies were equivalent to the bodies of several thousands or tens of thousands of people. The explosive power they could unleash was terrifying. This was the advantage of their body size. The two dragon claws slapped down fiercely. Before they even got close, strong gales gushed forth, causing Feng Xingjian's robes to flutter. Just the explosive power of these two huge dragons was enough to crush an armored vehicle with a single claw attack. They were extremely ferocious. However, faced with the incoming dragon claws, Feng Xingjian focused all of his attention on his consciousness. In the center of his consciousness, the light spot that represented the Heaven's Volition sword intent instantly burst out with a myriad of light rays. The Heaven's Volition sword intent was activated. Endless sword intents and endless information exploded in Feng Xingjian's mind, as if a cosmic storm was stirring up his brain. However, right now, Feng Xingjian's ether synchronization rate was already at 78%. Therefore, it was no longer as difficult for him to receive the information contained in the Heaven's Volition sword intent. Feng Xingjian worked hard to keep his mind clear, working hard to receive the information and energy contained in the Heaven's Volition sword intent. Streams of sword intent gushed out, and in that instant, Feng Xingjian's body seemed to have turned into two sword lotus flowers. His ether synchronization rate was raised to 100%, and he seemed to be able to sense the existence of space and the flow of time. However, the most profound feeling was still his grasp over his physical body. At this moment, he felt as if he could sense any cell in his body at will. He saw the birth of countless cells and the death of countless cells. He felt that his body was going through the cycle of life and death at every moment. Beneath the cells, countless physical particles seethed and roared. They formed the most basic cell units in the human body, and the insides of these particles were circulating with an extremely mysterious rhythm. It was as if a new world was being nurtured within them. There were 1.08 billion particles, and each one of them was a new world. Between the particles, streams of heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces that traversed across the horizon connected them. At this moment, Feng Xinjian suddenly had an unprecedented understanding of his body, his cells, the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces in his body, the physical particles in his body, and the small worlds in his physical particles, which could only be sensed with an ether synchronization rate of 80%. Sensing the endless roaring and seething terror in his blood, Feng Xinjian's heaven's volition sword intent pierced through every single cell in his body with a single thought: suppress. In an instant, the information contained in the divine beast's blood essence was suppressed, and terrifying powers continued to slash out from the blood essence, merging into Feng Xinjian's limbs and bones. They merged into his physical particles, ceaselessly increasing the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces and increasing the strength of the connection between the physical particles. The toughness of Feng Xinjian's physical body was increasing at an unbelievable speed. Simultaneously, on his stats window, although the powers contained in the blood essence continued to merge into his cells, Feng Xinjian's potential points were increasing at a rate of over 1,000 points per second. Power was seething, and ether was roaring. Concurrently, the two dragon claws had already slapped down before Feng Xinjian. Therefore, Feng Xinjian opened his eyes slightly, and the heaven's volition sword intent gushed out. His gaze was like sword light, and the sword light slashed out. With two soft swoosh-swoosh sounds, sword light flashed on the two dragon claws, and the entire dragon claws were slashed off. They were then slashed into several hundred pieces of meat that flew past Feng Xinjian's body and flew out. Blood gushed forth, and a tremendous amount of blood exploded and was about to splatter onto Feng Xinjian's body. However, the zenith light sword formation spun continuously, evaporating all the blood that had landed on him. The two huge dragons looked at their bare arms and let out furious roars. However, halfway through their roars, their furious roars turned into agonizing cries. The smile on the feminine-looking young man's face froze. Boundaries negation was activated. The prodigious demolition sword physique was activated. Every single cell in Feng Xinjian's body seemed to be trembling crazily. The auras of over 100 specialty seeds rose up, and the demolition sword light had already encompassed his arms and torso. Taking a step forward, violent physical strength gathered in Feng Xinjian's body. The prodigious demolition sword physique annihilated the air wherever it passed by. Therefore, without any sound or presence, Feng Xinjian's fist had already smashed onto the crystal dragon's chest. Under the exquisite control of targeting the physical particles, the prodigious demolition sword physique annihilated the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces between the physical particles. The basic structure of the physical particles was destroyed, and everything started to break down. Amidst world-shaking, agonizing cries, Feng Xinjian punched out consecutively. Each punch seemed to contain the most terrifying power in the world. Amidst the loud boom, 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 boom sounds, it was as if a myriad of cannons were firing at the same time. Feng Xinjian tore open the crystal dragon's chest and dashed into the dragon's body. He then tore open the muscles and skin of the dragon's thighs, dashing out from the dragon's skin. Feng Xinjian's fists punched a path through the crystal dragon's body. After letting out an agonizing cry, the dragon's massive body fell onto the ground. Blood splattered everywhere, and the ground trembled a little. Killing the crystal dragon took Feng Xinjian 1/10 of a second. As the crystal dragon fell onto the ground, Feng Xinjian's body flashed slightly, and without making a sound, he appeared behind the three-headed dragon. The sword force in Fang Xingjian's body gushed out crazily, and he grabbed onto one of the three-headed dragon's necks. Then he smashed down fiercely with his fist, and a mountainous and ocean-like power exploded crazily in the three-headed dragon's body. At the same time, the prodigious demolition sword physique was activated at full power, and Fang Xingjian tore open one of the three-headed dragon's necks. Then he stomped on the air and smashed out two thunderbolts. With the reinforcement from the demolition sword light, he became one with the sword and pierced through the other two necks of the three-headed dragon. The feminine-looking young man's pupils contracted, and he wore an astonished expression. However, 2 seconds had passed. Before he could react, Fang Xingjian had once again appeared before the golden dragon under him. Under the prodigious demolition sword physique, Fang Xingjian became one with the sword. Everywhere he passed by, the air would be annihilated, allowing him to completely break free from the restrictions of air resistance. His agility attribute of 288 points was unleashed explosively, and he seemed to have turned into a stream of light, piercing through the golden dragon's chest. However, his feet still had to come into contact with the air, allowing him to move by stomping on the air. Another thunderous rumble rang out, and Fang Xingjian stomped on the air, creating streams of air currents and stopping in midair. Lifting his head, it was as if the entire world had come to a standstill. Under the eruption of the heaven's volition sword intent, all of Fang Xingjian's abilities seemed to have been unleashed to an extreme. His gaze swept across the dragons, and there were densely packed light spots flashing on each of the dragons' bodies. Those were their weaknesses, the hearts of all the colossal dragons. Every second, every inch, he had never had such a clear grasp of the world. Swoosh! Within 5 seconds, thunderous sounds rang out, and countless streams of air force scattered in all directions. Other than his feet, he was no longer restricted by air resistance. In that instant, Fang Xingjian's speed was raised to a terrifying level. Endless power burst out from his body, and the prodigious demolition sword physique was activated. He was like the sharpest divine sword in the world, piercing through the hearts of all the dragons within 5 seconds. When the feminine-looking young man took a few steps back and looked at Fang Xingjian with terror in his eyes, a myriad of dragon corpses descended from the sky. Blood splattered across the entire sky, as if it was raining blood. Even the golden dragon under the feminine-looking young man's feet plunged toward the ground. Before the feminine-looking young man could understand what had happened, Fang Xingjian had already appeared before him once again. Fang Xingjian pressed a hand gently toward the young man's chest. "Are you afraid? You're just a little bug in summer." Chapter 399. Are you afraid? You're just a little summer bug. Hearing Fang Xingjian's words, the feminine-looking young man's face revealed an extremely savage expression. He opened up his arms as if he was embracing the sky, and his chest seemed to have turned into a black hole in that instant. Countless dragon shadows darted out from his chest, dashing out toward Fang Xingjian's body. Level 5 Black Magic, Dragon's Impact, used the spirit of a dragon beast from another world to attack the opponent. However, faced with this series of attacks, Fang Xingjian merely glared at the young man, and the Heaven's Volition sword intent gushed out. It was as if the world was tearing apart, tearing the dragon beast spirit into pieces. It even struck into the feminine-looking young man's mind, causing him to let out an agonizing cry. At the next moment, Fang Xingjian's palm pressed down on the feminine-looking young man's body. Wherever his palm passed by, all the flesh and blood would be destroyed, turning into waves of heat energy that dissipated into the world. The young man's entire chest was pierced through by Fang Xingjian's palm and then disappeared. However, this was an expert from the Terrene Shrine. Fang Xingjian had once fought an intense battle with their bishop, so how could he not know how strong the vitality of these monsters was? Without waiting for the young man to make any moves, Fang Xingjian punched out repeatedly with his fists, and large amounts of flesh and blood were turned into meat by the prodigious demolition sword physique. The sudden heat currents heated up the air, causing it to swell up and form waves of shock waves that swept out in all directions. Boom, 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 boom. The shock waves swept out crazily, and Feng Xingjian had completely crushed the feminine-looking young man's upper body. Not even a single particle was left behind. Just as Feng Xingjian punched out with both of his fists and was about to crush the feminine-looking young man's lower body, an enraged bellow rang out from behind him. A winged dragon man covered in green scales pounced toward him. This was the old butler who had been following the feminine-looking young man all this while. The assassin had activated the level 5 black magic, Dragon's Parasitism, unleashing the power of the dragon beast in his body. However, the power of this dragon beast was at most comparable to a level 25 conferred knight. How could it possibly be of any importance to Feng Xingjian? Spreading out his fingers, he swiped behind him as if he was sweeping away trash. A ferocious sword force surged out, directly tearing the old butler into pieces. However, this final attack also caused the 1 second that Feng Xingjian had to activate the Heaven's Volition sword intent to completely pass. He then turned back, wanting to attack the feminine-looking young man. However, at this moment, a streak of sword chi swept past and went straight for his brain. Feng Xingjian was infuriated. He turned around and shattered the sword chi with a punch. The person who had unleashed the sword chis was Sword Saint Sasa. When Feng Xingjian activated the Heaven's Volition sword intent, he had already reacted. However, he had not expected that after Feng Xingjian activated the Heaven's Volition sword intent, his abilities would be completely different from the previous time he had activated it. Feng Xingjian had instantly wiped out the army of dragons and had even almost reduced the feminine-looking young man into ashes. Upon seeing Feng Xingjian's performance, Sasa understood that he had completely suppressed and absorbed the essence of the god's blood. At the thought that Feng Xingjian's current great abilities were all due to the Heaven's Volition sword intent and the essence of the god's blood, Sasa's eyes almost turned bloodshot. However, the abilities that Feng Xingjian had displayed in killing the army of dragons in an instant were far too powerful. He had suppressed the 2 assassins from the Sand Country and Sasa. Even though Sasa was enraged, he did not charge forward immediately. It was only when the feminine-looking young man's old butler charged forward that the 1 second that Feng Xingjian had activated the Heaven's Volition sword intent finally ended. It was only after sensing that Feng Xingjian's sword intent was rapidly weakening and dissipating that Sasa dared to charge out and slash out. At the same time that he slashed out, he bellowed furiously through information currents. This guy has absorbed the blood essence of a divine level expert. Kill him quickly while he hasn't completely digested the blood essence. Otherwise, all of us will die. However, right now, Feng Xingjian was no longer the Feng Xingjian from before. Faced with Sasa, who was charging toward him, Feng Xingjian tapped out with a finger, and ether sword ripples swept out consecutively, sending Sasa flying. With a rumble, Sasa collided onto the ground, sending up dust and smoke. However, at the same time, a great amount of sand gushed forth, pouncing toward Feng Xingjian. However, just as the endless sand encompassed Feng Xingjian's entire body, 10 streams of ether sword ripples shot out, sending the sand flying and slashing out a vacuum zone. Feng Xingjian did not follow up with another attack. Instead, he looked at his stats window. Unknowingly, his potential points had increased to over 200,000. Moreover, as the divine level blood essence continued to be digested, it was still increasing rapidly. Recalling what Sasa had said earlier, Feng Xingjian thought calmly, the blood essence of a divine level expert? That's really great. With a dash, Sasa sent a myriad of streams of sword chis gushing out. Wherever they passed by, even the air would be slashed into pieces. Rumbling sounds rang out incessantly, as if there were a myriad of thunderbolts exploding. It was also as if the earth deep in the earth's core was shattering. Simultaneously, over 100 specialty seeds throughout his body suddenly unleashed waves of intense aura. flashing incessantly on his body like starlight. He had detonated 100 specialty seeds in one go to propel the penetrating invisible sword cheese. Sasa's penetrating invisible sword cheese had the ability to slash through the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces. After this sword technique reached level 26 and was able to recognize physical particles, its prowess had improved tremendously and gotten increasingly stronger. Right now, Sasa had taken it a step further, detonating 100 specialty seeds to propel his sword move. His sword cheese slashed through the air directly. It should be known that the air was also made up of many physical particles. Each particle was like a small world, containing unlimited energy. Right now, Sasa was cutting off the connection between these particles, stimulating the power of the small world to exploding. This was equivalent to raising the level of refining the power of the small world in one's body to refining the power of the small world outside one's body. This penetrating invisible sword cheese shattered the air and destroyed the small world along the way, bringing with it a state of annihilation and world annihilation. This was Sasa's full power. Wherever the sword cheese passed by, it was as if everything in the world was destroyed. Endless light and heat burst out, wreaking havoc within a range of several leagues. The earth was vaporized and vaporized. The impact, which moved at a speed of several thousand meters per second, turned everything it encountered into dust. Feng Xingjian, who was in the lead, was also completely encompassed by the shock waves and light in that instant. At this moment, Sasa no longer wished to be able to capture Feng Xingjian and absorb his blood. Instead, he was fully focused on killing him. It was because he knew that if he were to continue to hold back, then if Feng Xingjian were to continue to grow, he might be the one to die. Regardless of whether it was the yellow sand or the fiery clouds, they all dissipated under this terrifying sword attack. The fiery clouds were extinguished by the strong gales, and the yellow sand was melted by the high temperature. The strong gales then soared up to an altitude of 10,000 meters. The intense explosions lasted for over 10 seconds, turning the area within a range of several thousand meters into barren land. Half a minute later, the two assassins from the sand country slowly crawled out from a stretch of sand. A gust of hot wind gushed forth, as if wanting to cook human flesh. The two of them looked at the devastated battlefield, which had been completely turned into flat ground. Their eyes were filled with astonishment. They had not expected that Sword Saint Sasa would still have such a terrifying move hidden up his sleeves. "Is he dead?" the old assassin asked. If one were to be struck by such a sword attack head-on, there's no way he would be able to survive. The female assassin frowned. Damn it. If that's the case, wouldn't the Heavenly Abyss Annihilation Armor be destroyed as well? That shouldn't be the case, the old man said. The Heavenly Abyss Annihilation Armor is a level 29 superior divine weapon, formed from Lord Damarov's remains. Even if it can't protect Feng Xingjian, his body should still be around. Chapter 400. The female assassin nodded. However, right now, the entire battlefield was still shrouded in endless dust and smoke. Sand had been sent flying into the sky by the earlier explosion, causing the air to be filled with sand and dust. It was impossible to see what was going on. Therefore, the two assassins from the sand country had no choice but to search the battlefield bit by bit. They did not dare to use their abilities to sweep out the smoke because they still did not know the situation on the battlefield and how many people had survived. If they would be the first to use their abilities to clean up the battlefield, they might be the first to expose themselves and become the target of everyone. Therefore, the two of them strolled slowly through the battlefield. Wherever they passed by, the sand would sweep out in all directions like probing waves, slowly detecting the movements in the surroundings. "All right." The old man waved his hand, and the ground under his feet trembled. A sand coffin rose up from the surface of the ground. The sand coffin changed, revealing Lilia's head. I almost forgot about her. To think that she didn't die in such an intense battle? What an exuberant life force. At the start of the battle, they had buried Lilia in the sand coffin and hidden her underground. They had thought that she would be useful in the battle against Fang Xingjian. However, they had not expected that everything had happened too quickly. Before they could react, the battle had basically ended. Are we still going to bring her along? The female assassin frowned and said, "Let's just kill her." The old man shook his head. "Just in case, let's bring her along first. At the very least, she can be considered a hostage." On the other side, a loud collision sound rang out. Yaris pushed away the several tens of tons of rocks on him and got up from the ground. To think that Sasa still had such a move hidden up his sleeves. Letting out a breath, Yaris looked at the dust in the air and frowned. Fang Xingjian was too close to this sort of attack. Even if he survives, he'll probably suffer from serious injuries. We must find him as soon as possible and save him. At the thought of Sasa's earlier sword attack, which seemed like it could destroy the world, Yaris felt his heart tremble. If he had been in Fang Xingjian's position earlier, it would have been impossible for him to have fended off that sword attack. It would have been normal for him to suffer from serious injuries and be on the verge of death. Thinking of this, Yaris raised his palm, and streams of flames darted out. Just as he was about to blow away the dust, he suddenly stopped. There are too many enemies here. The assassins from the Sand Country, Sasa, and the monsters from the Serene Shrine, whose status is unknown. If I attack directly, I'm afraid I'll be surrounded. I can only be careful and search for Xingjian's traces in secret. Thinking of this, Yaris slowly walked into the smoke and dust, heading toward the location where Fang Xingjian was according to his memories. Along the way, he continued to use his heaven's perception to scan the surroundings. On the other side, a small snake slowly emerged from the ground. The small snake was dark green in color, and its entire body was smooth as if it had just been born. However, if one looked closely at the snake's eyes, one would be able to see a trace of cunning, cruelty, and anger. Damned Fang Xingjian. He actually swallowed a high god's blood essence? Who gave it to him? Thinking of how he had been defeated by Fang Xingjian and how the army of dragons which he had painstakingly gathered had been completely wiped out, the small snake's eyes were filled with heartache, feeling as if his heart was dripping blood. He was the feminine-looking young man whose body had almost been crushed by Fang Xingjian. After that, he had been in danger from the repercussions of Sasa's ultimate attack, causing him to only have this little bit of body tissue left. However, only the people from the Serene Shrine would be able to achieve this. They could modify and reassemble their bodies almost as they wished, displaying an extremely powerful vitality. To think that the blood essence of a high god would have something like this. In that case, there's nothing much to say about me being defeated by you. But in that last attack, Fang Xingjian was forced to retreat from his explosive state, and then he took on Sasa's ultimate attack. He might have already fainted from serious injuries. Thinking of this, the small snake's eyes were filled with excitement. Although his army of dragons had been wiped out, if he could get his hands on Fang Xingjian's body, engulf his flesh, absorb his life, and obtain Fang Xingjian's power and the essence of the divine blood in his body, then everything would be worth it. Fang Xingjian, it's true that you're very powerful. But so what? The path of knights is this foolish. It's a one-sided pursuit of great power and instant explosive power. It's easy to break if you're too rigid. It's not like black magic, which is omnipotent and has more well-rounded abilities. If you wish to survive in this world, you'll need to rely on all-round abilities and not individual specialties. Fang Xingjian, after I snatch your physical body and refine it with black magic, I'll be able to become the number one person below the divine level. Thinking of the terrifying power that Fang Xingjian had unleashed in that 1 second, the small snake's eyes burned with passion. With such a powerful physical body and the fact that it contained the blood essence of a divine-level expert, even he was extremely tempted. The small snake darted out toward the center of the explosion, exerting force from the friction on his abdomen and twisting his tail. Each time he darted out, he would cover a distance of several meters as if he was flying. When he landed once again, He jumped up abruptly. So hot, so hot, so hot. The melted ground emitted a high temperature of several hundred degrees Celsius, causing smoke to rise from the small snake's abdomen. Just as he was wondering if he should continue moving forward, a strong gust of wind blew past, blowing away the smoke before him and revealing the scene within a range of 100 meters. The small snake lifted his head and looked over. When he saw the body that was still standing straight like a javelin in the center of the battlefield, astonishment flashed in his eyes. Feng Xingjian's entire body was covered by the Heavenly Abyss Annihilation Armor. However, even with the sturdiness of the Heavenly Abyss Annihilation Armor, large areas of scales had fallen off, revealing his skin. His skin was crimson red, and there were also large areas of scorch marks and burns. However, his muscles had not been broken through. How is this possible? To think that this is all he got after being hit head-on? In the small snake's imagination, it would be normal even if Feng Xingjian's flesh and blood would be splattered all over, and he would have lost an arm or a leg. On the contrary, his injuries seemed to be too light. However, he did not know that in Feng Xingjian's body, the power of the divine blood's essence was being stimulated incessantly. When he was facing Sas's sword attack earlier, it had already pushed his body's toughness to the level of a level 28 superior divine weapon. All the physical particles in his body were tightly connected together. Each strand of his bones and muscles were like indestructible diamonds, emitting waves of glow under his senses. However, in order to fend off Sas's final attack, the divine blood's essence had depleted in excess of its power, causing Feng Xingjian's physical body to not be able to reach the toughness of a level 29 divine weapon. He was only at level 28. The potential points on Feng Xingjian's stats window had also increased to over 9 million points. The last burn mark on the surface of his body slowly recovered, and the internal organs in his body also gradually recovered. Feng Xingjian opened his eyes slowly and looked at Sword Saint Sasa, who was on his knees and panting intensely. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.